This is our Tuesday, August 8th, regular Board of County Commissioners work session. And we're going to start off with a staff presentation on Phase 2 Waste Diversion Plan implementation.
Great. Thanks, George. I'm Brian Untitled. I'm the Public Works Director, and I'm here with Kathy Hall, the manager of the Solid Waste Center. And this is the first meeting in a series of 4 meetings that's going to occur with the Board of County Commissioners over the next month. This first meeting today is going to talk about waste diversion and a study that we recently completed and our initial draft plan from that study. On August 15th, we're going to have a broader discussion about the landfill and its remaining life that we recently studied, and we have the results back, and we're excited to present that to the board in order to come up with a long-term plan based on the remaining life of the landfill. On September 5th, we're going to come back to the board to talk about one of the things that happens when you own a landfill is you have leachate. And so we have a management plan for the leachate that we have at the landfill and a stormwater management plan as well. So we'll be bringing that to the board at the beginning of September. And in the middle of September, on the 12th, we will be bringing a drop-in swap facility plan and design to the board to consider constructing in 2018. So over the next month, we'll be bringing landfill issues to the board in 4 different meetings that we can discuss a wide variety of topics and hopefully set the course for the landfill in its future and ultimate closure at a date that we will hopefully work out with the board through scenario planning. But today we're going to focus on waste diversion and a draft plan that has been submitted.
Okay. Hi, Kathy Hall, Solid Waste Manager, here with 2 consultants that worked on our waste diversion plan, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Ryan Ellis with Weaver Consultants Group.
And I'm Lori Batchelder Adams with LBA Associates.
So, this process we started back in April 2015 with a partnership with the City of Aspen, and its goal was to develop waste diversion planning, recommendations, goals for the Roaring Fork Valley. So we completed phase 1 a little over a year ago, and we've been working on phase 2 ever since. And in these 2 phases, it included 3 waste sorts, 2 at the landfill for general household trash, or business trash, and 1 for construction and demolition debris, a visual waste sort. We conducted and held multiple stakeholder meetings as well as surveys with those stakeholders. And so today we're here to have the discussion with the board of what we found from all of this work and get a feel from you. Are our recommendations on track? Are you in support of it? Would you like to see something more? So once we complete this meeting, we'll come back with a final report with these goals and directives to divert waste in the valley. And from that, I'm going to step away and let the consultants who have done the most of the legwork give you the presentation and tell you what we found.
Great. Well, thanks very much. I'm Lori again, and I get to kick this off. I won the coin toss. And really glad to be here. And I have to say, I think I might have said this the last time I get a chance, or we get a chance to talk to you folks. It's so impressive to be here in Pitkin County and hear this litany of projects and activities that you're taking on and you take seriously and you take positively. It's, as a consultant that works around the state, it's a joy to be somewhere where this is a serious topic. So to kick things off, Ryan and I didn't want to go too crazy with recapping where we've been, but we had a couple of things we wanted to just revisit to set the stage. And as I say, you folks are doing a lot, and you've got a great, strong foundation, but there's always more to be done no matter where we are. And we have found through our work in phase 1 and phase 2 to date that no matter the efforts, that in the landfill, we're still seeing good things being thrown away. We're still seeing good resources being wasted. In particular, on, as Kathy said, the household and the business side, we're seeing recyclables and organics to the tune of nearly 60% of what's going in the trash could have been diverted by existing programs. So we're kind of missing the boat there with some opportunities. Perhaps the bigger slice of the pie, and I actually have a pie to show you in a couple slides, is the construction and demolition debris that we've talked about a few times. Talk about bang for the buck. You guys have so much building going on that there's a lot of material there. And again, you, the county, are doing a phenomenal job of diverting a lot of that material, but it's a big number. So anything left over that goes into the landfill is still a lot of material. So again, another opportunity there. And then on a perhaps a slightly different level is the issue of how waste is being managed in the aggregate up and down the valley, a little differently by every community, so that the programs look different, the branding, the signage looks different, the recyclables accepted or organics taken, if any, are different. And we all know that the public doesn't need a lot of excuses to throw their hands up and say, too much work, not going to do it. So we think there's a big opportunity to streamline and make consistent some of the programming just to take that excuse away. So all of these things lead to the undesirable outcomes you can see on the right side of the screen, and not that you folks aren't well aware of all of them, but wasting resources is really not something we want to do any more than we have to, especially when our infrastructure, our disposal infrastructure is shrinking. And we have big decisions to make, or you have big decisions to make down the road, and we don't want to exacerbate that. And certainly well aware that the county as well as the city have been doing a lot of climate action thinking and planning, and by not diverting these materials, we missed the boat in terms of the greenhouse gas emission reductions we could be doing. So what do we do about all of that? Let's go ahead. I warned you that I had a pie chart coming. Just wanted to kind of recap and redefine the two areas of the waste stream that we spend a lot of time referencing. As you can see, this is what it looks like in Pitkin County. And on a quick refresher, the municipal solid waste, the blue side, this is household and business institutional waste. We're all pretty comfortable standing on that blue slice. We get that waste stream. It's pretty homogeneous, looks the same pretty much all the time. What changes is the peaks up and down with the seasonality of tourism and second homeowners. But we get that. We get a lot more nervous when we have to jump over to the yellow side. The non-MSW is really construction, demolition, deconstruction debris here in Pitkin County, and boy, it looks different all the time, depending on the season, the project. We never really know what it is, and it's far and away the biggest slice. This data is 2016. You might remember in 2015, that slice was even more dramatic, and the C&D side was bigger. And that just, it tells you, underscores the diversity that we have with that particular waste stream, and we really have to work at it. But it's a huge opportunity. These are percents by weight, so we're looking at tonnages, just to clarify. So let's go on, and I think I had one last slide in here where before I get too crazy and say too many things about all the work that needs to be done, we wanted to just acknowledge again that Pitkin County, the city of Aspen, and the two of you as partners have done phenomenal things, and this was a slide just really to acknowledge that, whether it's the waste diversion infrastructure at the Solid Waste Center, the upcoming drop and swap that I hear is on your September agenda, the fact that both the county and the city of Aspen have acknowledged the private sector collection emphasis and have done some policy work there, the drop site that admittedly I did put on the Aspen side, because I always think of it as Aspen location. I know very much that the county is involved in helping manage and financially support that site. City, of course, has a disposal ban. And then there are all the programs that are either jointly operated or you both do. Scraps is an outstanding one on the commercial and multifamily food waste side of things, outreach, climate action, and then the effort just to do the diversion planning that we're here to talk about today. And I did want to underscore the diversion plan and just remind all of you that with your support, the diversion plan focus is not just the city of Aspen and unincorporated Pitkin County, but we've taken the stance that it's really Roaring Fork Valley wide, and we've defined that as carbon to Aspen. And the thinking being that the consistency, the resource sharing, they're not reinventing the wheel, makes a lot of sense in that particular sector. So that's where we are, even though it is the city and the county that are working on this, we really want to set some examples and standards that the other governments and communities could follow.
Thank you, Lori.
And I think the last thing I wanted to mention was really the culmination of what we got out of phase one and the suggested focus that we as consultants, Weaver and LBA, made to staff and to the commissioners late last year on what the focus ought to be as we go forward in terms of the ability to make a difference, bang for the buck, really change diversion. And the first two, I think, are quite obvious. The first one, food waste diversion for large generators, you could state this as commercial food waste generation. This is the biggest apple, the biggest bang on the municipal side of the solid waste pie, if you will. And our thinking here, Ryan's going to speak to this, is that we really target groceries, large restaurants and cafeterias, whether they be in schools or hospitals, where we can really get at some sizable serious waste and take advantage of the infrastructure that the county has developed. The second one in the middle, of course, is construction and demolition debris, C&D. We want to talk about ways to create incentives to do a better job with keeping that material out of the landfill. The third one kind of comes back to the municipal solid waste side of the pie. It's a little bit of a softer approach, but it gets at the fact that we rely so heavily in this valley, and in fact in Colorado, on private collection. We rely on the private sector to move our materials from the generation point to where and how we're going to manage it. And when that happens, we sometimes need to see some regulation and policy so we can set standards and make sure minimum levels of service are accomplished. Both Pitkin County, as you well know, and the city of Aspen have ordinances. They look quite a bit different in terms of the meat they contain and what they require. The county's is a lot more voluntary. Both of them have good intentions and could be very effective, but fall short on the enforcement side, which means they aren't. The efficacy isn't there. The results aren't there as well as they could be, and we'd like to talk about tweaking those and adding the enforcement. Also, setting the standard and developing a consistency between these two governments that could be perhaps have a good ripple effect down the valley. So those were our focus points. That's what we're here to talk to you today about in terms of recommendations going forward. With that, I think, Ryan,
I think it's my
we
turn.
toss it over to you.
As Lori had mentioned, during the Phase 1 waste diversion study, we sampled the MSW stream. And here's a pie chart, or a chart that shows what we found. And within the MSW stream, organics was the largest component. And it'll detail the specifics that were broken out. And what we're here to talk about today is the food waste component, which you can see is the biggest. Not only that, but you already have a program to accept this waste stream at the Pitkin County Solid Waste Center and produce a much needed product in the valley, which is compost. The landfill sells out of it every year. It's in high demand. It's just a very easy waste stream to divert, and it goes to a real use. What our purpose here today is to get your feel on if we're on track with these recommendations and if they have your support. So the first recommendation is require large food waste generators to do food waste diversion and or donation. The Roaring Fork Valley generates a lot of food waste, and there's existing donation programs. One of the challenges is that the food banks are already full. So there's usable food that is going to a food bank, but the food bank can't take anymore because they don't have as much need. So finding a way to get that to needy communities and or to the compost operation. The second one is the existing scraps program. There's challenges with food waste. One of the big challenges is contamination. And that contamination is in the form of, plastic bags, people putting things into the compost bin that don't compost at the Pitkin County Solid Waste Center. They have a certain type of operation. It works well. It just doesn't take everything that might have a compostable symbol on it. So provide education to the existing participants of the scrap program. I kind of jumped in the third one, but one of the big draws to Pitkin County are some of the events that you guys hold. The beauty, it's a very nice place to come and visit. There are lots of events that try to hold food waste. They provide compost bins for these events, but when they select the wrong materials, for their utensils, for their cups, for their lids. That material ends up not compatible with the compost operation and has to get screened out. So providing better education to those event holders so that when they're going through the effort of diverting this waste, that it can truly get used. And then leading by example. If you are serious about food waste diversion, take it on yourselves to provide or require food waste diversion in city and county buildings. So I would like to open it to the commissioners to provide any insight that you may have about food waste diversion.
I've got a couple of questions. Are we still taking food waste from Delta County, other counties? Well, I know we were for a while, and I wonder whether we should still be doing that given the challenge we have with our own waste diversion and the lifespan of the landfill.
Occasionally. So the Walmarts on the western slope, they haul all of their food waste to us. They just like our program, they like the way we compost it, and we're able to sell it. So Walmart's actually has a very big sustainability target, so we are part of that. So it does come from Delta County occasionally. Whatever Walmart's on the western slope could end up at our place. About once a week we get a truck. The other one, there's a festival in Paonia that does bring their stuff over, only because Mesa County, the closer one, will not accept food waste. So we're really one of the only facilities on the western slope that'll take food waste. So those are about the only two I know of.
But those don't get buried. Those get turned, those are necessary to make the compost out of the construction wood.
And the Walmart waste, the food waste they bring in is extremely clean. It's awesome. So they do a very good job of cleaning and sorting out their material.
And then on the special events, do we, along with the city, do we have as part of the permit process, or should we look at our permit process to require the special event venues to not only require compostable materials, but even perhaps banning the plastic bottles that we see coming in as far away as, the Fiji market?
So Liz Chapman with the city of Aspen is here and can speak more to it. They have a very stringent, any festivals or events held in the city of Aspen are required to meet these compostable standards. Pitkin County does not, Snowmass Village does not, so.
Yeah, it's something we should be looking at.
Yep. That's what I was thinking about.
And encouraging snowmass to do
Yeah,
too.
Steve?
I've been participating at the Carbondale Mountain Fair for years on the green team. And it's a huge monumental labor of love among all the volunteers to be sorting the compostables out from the other stuff. And a large percentage of what they come up with is compostable. Now, first question, that all comes to the Pitkin County landfill, and I am wondering how much of that is contaminated, and can you use it all, or do you end up throwing some loads completely away because there's too much contamination?
So the last few years we have accepted, we've donated the tipping fee to Carbondale Mountain Fair, and it's very clean. So we are able to compost everything that comes in, so they do a good job. Yeah, thanks.
Then there's items like aluminum foil that has food waste on it, and every year there's a debate. We're told to just throw it in the trash, and other people say no, put it in the recycled material, and I really want to know what is the truth about that.
Heavily contaminated aluminum foil with food should go into the trash. So Waste Management, who accepts our recyclable materials, they do expect some contamination. And as a county and City of Aspen as a whole, we have a very low contamination rate of about 8%. So if some dirty aluminum foil gets in there, it's not a huge issue. We won't reject a load of recyclables for that.
And then this year there was an incident that shows how difficult it is to have all the vendors have all compostable material. There was one vendor at the Carbondale Mountain Fair who had cups that looked like they were made from corn. On the bottom, they were a number 7 on the thing, but they actually were only 20% compostable and 80% recyclable. So, and they thought they were doing the right thing. So that just shows how difficult it is
Really
to,
hard.
if you require vendors to come up with the right stuff, and then even though they're trying, it's really hard for them to get everything to be compostable.
And then good news is, it doesn't break down. So what happens when the compost is finished cooking, it goes through a whole screening process, and that stuff gets screened out. And it's unfortunate because they are thinking they're doing the right thing. They probably spent a lot of money on those cups, more so than a plastic cup, and it just gets screened out in the trash. So, but we can get it out usually, and it doesn't do too much harm.
Yeah. And all that said, I would wholeheartedly support requiring that any event where they're serving food and drinks to the public, that all the material needs to be either recyclable or compostable.
Yeah, and there was very little trash from
It'd be
Mountain
easy
Fair.
enough for people to do that, and they just need to know ahead of time and go to the right vendors to get the right materials and be aware of it, and I think we could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for your work and bringing us this far along. I really appreciate it. And George already asked the question about special event policies, and for that matter, I guess the waste hauler policies. And I don't think that we have yet passed a waste hauler ordinance to require that they offer recycling within their existing billing structure, similar to the cities. And that's something I really would like to see go forward. I've been talking about it, frankly, for a few years now, because I was part of the city council when we passed that ordinance. And I think it just would add some consistency between the city and county lines, frankly, and the haulers who are doing business in both areas. I also agree that we should work with the Special Events Review Committee and our ComDev and make this a standard of special event permitting, that they must use compostable or recyclable materials, preferably compostable. And I think it's then on us to give them a list of vendors and types of products, how to contact them. You don't want people trying to look at the shelves of City Market and say, oh, can I, they really, we have to assist people in how they make that happen. And so perhaps even producing a guide to recyclable special events, a guide to composting at special events, things like that. I think that would be one of the best ways to spread the word to Snowmass and other municipalities as well. But I'm fully in favor of that. Similar to that, the thing that I think that we're lacking a little, I know there's some efforts and some attempts, and that is more marketing and advertising about what to do and how to do it. I live at Hunter Creek. We have some composting, we have composting, but we also have the recycling bins. And you just regularly see somebody who's taken all this effort to recycle and put it in a plastic trash bag. And I'm like, well, are the people at the landfill opening all those bags and dumping the stuff out? Or at that point, do they just assume it's half trash and not? I just don't know. But, when I visit other communities along the Front Range, you regularly see a half-page ad on page 5, not a quarter-page ad on page 17, and it's just got to be more up in front and center. And, I think we can get that sort of advertising on CGTV and perhaps grassroots TV and find other ways to get the words out. I know it's not all newspapers anymore, and there's other more effective ways with social media, but I just don't necessarily believe that we've had as much of emphasis on that within your budget. And I think that when we look at the 2018 budgets, that's got to be a much more major component of this. And the message at some level, although I'm not sure what the wording or the answer is that this is about the life of the landfill. And I think people, when they come to realize there's going to be longer term consequences, that at some point you're going to be paying haulers to take it all the way to Glenwood, on a daily basis, that's going to be much more expensive for businesses and individuals. And the reason of why we're doing this has to be a little more predominant than it is right now. So those are my thoughts on it right now.
Yeah, again, too, thank you guys. And when are you gonna do another trash sorting? I thought that was kind of funny. I want to see if anybody finds that pair of Ray-Bans still in the case.
Let you know.
I would like to find out more about requiring the large food waste generators to divert food waste. I think we need to, that's huge. I mean, it's not like just me diverting mine, it's the guys that are producing them by the mass quantities. I think we need to look into that. I think we need to work with the city on our own buildings, you know, and with snowmass and basalt. I mean, they're part of the county too. Into you know, showing the way and showing that we're doing the best thing first, and we want everybody else to follow suit. I believe in that when it comes to any rules and regulations at the county level. You know, we need to be following them better and doing what we are asking others to do. I think those are important. I think Rachel's right. We need to be looking at requiring waste haulers to do the same as the city requires. I think we need to start that process and get that done. Education, I think, is key, and I talked to Kathy about my own homeowners association. We need to follow up on signs, but that's something I think we need to do with all homeowners associations where they have dumpsters, and because you see your neighbors. In my own, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I talk to people, and we're all diving in and sorting our own trash just to make sure it's getting to where it needs to go in a clean fashion. So I think that, and looking at the signage in the city and the county in those dumpster bins to see if the signage is correct, because our signage doesn't do the single stream anymore, so people are really confused. And I know it's not just my homeowners association. So I think we need to look at that. That's a great way to hit a lot of target in education and make a difference. So I think we need to be doing that. And I think, for the most part, I think the events is critical. That's another great way to capture the audience, also in educating them, but also in getting that waste into the right place. Snowmass with the Jazz Fest, I don't know how good they are. They used to try, but I don't know if that's fallen by the wayside. So that is a huge event, and Snowmass is part of this. And I know the current city council out there is somebody that we could approach and say, come on, guys. So I think we need to bring them into our looking at events and looking at what the city does and just share it with them so it's not a big hurdle for them to jump to get it done. They can just say, oh, we'll just take what the city and county does and turn it into our own special events permitting process. I don't think that's going to be too hard to do. And I think if you need us to encourage city council and Snowmass to do that, we can definitely help out with that.
Well, I have great news about the Labor Day Jazz Aspen Fest. So Mountain Waste is their contractor, and last year, I don't know if any of you were there, in the program we had our characters, the reduce, reuse, refuse characters, but there were no recycle bins to be found. So I'm at Jazz Aspen, and everybody's like, where's the recycle bins, Kathy? I'm like,
Oh, that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
I know. So Mountain Waste has been pushing, and they finally agreed, because I believe there was a number of editorials in the paper kind of bashing the Jazz Aspen group for not
doing that.
This year, they're going to offer robust recycling stations and compost stations.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, and you'll see our characters again heavily
So
presented.
if I go volunteer, can I do the Hall & Oates concert? And I will be with Steve sorting out trash.
All right, I
Be
promised
there if
Mountain
they
Waste
won't.
we'd
We'll be
try
the green
and
team.
get
We'll
some
be leading the way.
volunteers. Yeah, so.
So I've got a question on the hauler ordinance, because that's probably going to be perhaps the most controversial, because the cost will undoubtedly be passed on to the homeowner on that. So my question is, I sort of like the idea under your second bullet, requiring haulers to establish a pricing based on size.
And the pay-as-you-throw?
So my question is, given all that, is for those of us who live down valley, right now we have the opportunity to utilize the recycle waste management at Willits in Elgibel. And I believe we're still, I forget how long that contract was in terms of us contributing to the operation of that, along with the town of Basalt. Is that going to be continued? And if so, you know, you may say the citizens are maybe paying twice then if they're required to have on-site recycling as well as having the opportunity to utilize the facility down in Elgibel.
Well, we've got a more detailed section on waste hauler ordinance, but the basalt eligible contract, it's really a year-by-year basis. So our overall contract with Waste Management expires in February 2019. So in about a year, we'll start rebidding that contract to handle, the transfer station essentially at the landfill, Rio Grande, Redstone, and then we'll look at the El Jabal facility as well. But do you guys want to jump in and get to the hauler ordinance?
I just wanted to add one more thing to that first bullet point I may have missed, is that large food waste generators would be grocery stores, large restaurants, cafeterias, and why we think that's an important waste stream is they have a back of house component which never touches the consumers, which means you're only educating the employees, and you have a much better success rate on contamination. So that would be the first step of targeting a large component of the volume and the one that has the best chance of being low contamination.
Does the hospital currently do that? Would do it? No, that'd be a good target. And the ski company does it with some of their restaurants, don't they?
Bumps at Buttermilk. They've had some significant contamination issues last winter, so we need to work with them.
Yeah, well, education of the new employees that come and go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think what you're saying in part is that this is probably the tough nut on this slide, the big one, as you mentioned,
The
Commissioner Clapper, the commercial piece. But the thinking is we start slow, we start easy, in a phased-in approach. We build on the scraps program, which is essentially the same thing on a volunteer level, and see if we can't really take a bite out of the food waste and then supplement it with the other programs that you've talked about.
Right. And speaking of scraps, we need to look at funding of that, because it's my understanding it might be falling by the wayside at the state grant level. Sorry, Rachel, I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, the funding is done. It ended a year ago. So in the 2018 budget, I've put in a significant chunk of money to keep that program going. Purchase the bear-proof bins, more buckets, education.
Handles for the compost.
Handles for the compost. Bags, even just something simple as a bag liner for the buckets that takes away the factor.
Rachel?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because we've talked about it, and even if they're sold to people, just the availability that you don't tell your consumer, you've got to go to Amazon and order these to be able to compost. It's got to be made simpler for folks, and at least the way the city's ordinance worked, if you've done your recycling properly, you probably are reducing the amount of trash.
Right.
And then for some consumers, it worked out to be the same or less bill than otherwise. So it was kind of a 50-50 depending on the size of containers that you use. And if you're able to go to a smaller waste container because you're recycling, you would have a lower bill. But we'll go into that more in depth. And the other thing is that, I believe, but it could have changed it, both the town of Basalt and we are paying to keep that recycling center open at Waste Management. So I don't know if that's double taxation or not, because it's coming out of our general funds as opposed to the individual consumer's bill. So we'll have to kind of evaluate that. The one thing I'd like to have some look at more carefully is, can there be differential rates for contaminated loads or for loads that have not been sorted? Maybe there's a certain percentage because there's a mistake ratio, but I love education, I love incentives. There's a certain point at which a dollar value becomes the greatest incentive, both for saving or for avoiding fees. And living in a large complex with a large homeowners association, when they say, this is going to start affecting your dues unless everyone contributes, it makes a much bigger difference than please, please, please. And so I think that we need to look at how would you evaluate if a load should come in at one rate versus another, or how does it get tracked back to the people who are not. It may be too complicated, but on the one hand, someone who's doing everything right, maybe they should pay a lesser rate, and move it in that direction as opposed to a higher rate for those who aren't. But the rates for the tipping fees have to be a part of this, is my perception. And the last is, again, just kind of one more time going back on the advertising or public awareness, understanding of the program. I know I personally feel like, wait a second, are these 10 sheets of paper going to just fly around in the air? Or does it have to be, is it good to, should I put a paper clip on it? I mean, you just kind of wonder, is 3 pieces of mail going into the recycle bin at Hunter Creek for the single sort, is that effective or is that problematic? And you just don't know. And so I think that, when in doubt, throw it out. I'll put it in the trash, it's instead or something like that. So I think, helping people understand better what really can happen. And again, this is just maybe something stuck in my head from other places, but that the cap for super hard plastic, is that really getting recycled or is that not good? You should just put the glass bottle in, but the hard cap of a different type of plastic should be put in the trash. I think people have these questions left and right. Thank you.
Yeah, one other thought about the food waste issue. At the Mountain Fair, most of the compostable stuff is not food, but it's actually products made from corn or from paper. And if we could have a change in thinking among the people putting the food waste into the things, if they also put paper products that are compostable into that. Absolutely. And make that a habit. And it's going to take some real education and kind of a change in mindset of people to start doing that. But that would be something to consider, to really take another big, huge chunk out of what's being landfilled.
George?
Yes.
If I might just clarify one thing. I think it's important because it's confusing where the funding goes for the recycle centers. These are all supported through tip fees at the landfill. So no general fund monies or tax money is going to them. It's all supported through the landfill tip fee effort.
Great, thanks for that clarification. On the C&D waste, I like the idea that working with ComDev to require a waste diversion plan to obtain a building permit. I mentioned this a few weeks ago as I was riding by the Hotel Lanedo and seeing that demolished, perfectly good materials. So it seems like, again, we would want to hopefully be able to coordinate with the City of Aspen as well as Town of Snowmass Village to come up with a standard that everyone would utilize, understanding that they, as Rachel said earlier, down the road, they'll be paying much higher fees to having to transport that down to Glenwood. So I think that's a critical part of, especially in Pitkin County, where we see so many scrape and replace homes and buildings, probably very unusual with it from the rest of the state, I would say. And we've got to capture that materials. And I know the new program you'll be talking about in terms of drop and swap would be an ideal place. But we have to make that a requirement for any demolition that we salvage that material.
And I'm going to let Ryan, maybe if you guys are ready, we can go into the C&D kind of recommendations and address some of that.
So in 2016, we did a waste sort of the C&D waste stream, not the entire year. It was a sample set, and it was during the moratorium on commercial demolition within the city of Aspen. So times have changed, but here's a breakdown of what we found, and there are usable materials in this waste stream. One of the very big challenges is where is that material going to go when it gets segregated out from the waste stream? So that is a big challenge that the Roaring Fork Valley needs to address is we need some outlets for this material.
Can you tell me what's the purple on that?
Oh, you can't see
I
it.
cannot read that.
It's treated and engineered wood.
Okay.
It's one of the waste streams.
And before you go off of this one, can all of those be reused, or how, which are the easiest, which are the hardest?
So in other markets, for instance, Denver, a lot of these materials are reused in some fashion, but they are all a challenge in the fact that somebody's probably not going to put used roofing back on their roof. A lot of these materials end up being repurposed for a different use. a lot of art type installation or art type uses. Construction or asphalt and concrete is the easiest, and metal is another
That's
very easy.
the red slice at the up.
Other ones?
Yeah,
that
can't
you
read
Can't
that one
quite see
either.
that one either.
Well, what about
yes.
drywall? Drywall isn't usually recyclable, is it?
No, drywall is a very big challenge. There are some niche markets, for instance, soil amendments. You have a gypsum wallboard plant in gypsum, and
They
they do
re-
not want it. So,
Can we talk to them a little more about that?
You could try. Drywall,
That was a question mark at the end of that statement?
drywall as well, you can compost it. It's a great amendment to the compost program. It's just a matter of
'Cause of
getting
its alkalinity?
nails or anything, yeah. And as well as the engineered wood, we think we have a use for it. If it's not treated, that CCA treated wood with that chromium arsenate, which is the pesticide they build in, if it's not treated, like pallets, untreated wood, other programs grind it and sell it as mulch. It would be just a matter of fact of us having to buy a grinder and being able to separate it. And our ComDev, our Community Development Department, the county has said, hey, we'll build into the permit, for the demo permit, whatever you want, as long as you can provide an outlet.
We need to be looking at that.
So,
And
this
looking at
is
the
what
grinder.
we're,
Yeah, you have to have
Going down that
the full
mindset.
cycle covered.
yeah.
if I could, I'd jump to the recommendations and allow you to comment.
Since we've already jumped there?
So as Kathy led into, we are working with the ComDev departments to ask them to require a waste diversion plan when getting a building permit. The city of Aspen already does that, and so Pitkin County to do the same. Another big component would be as different policies change and the market changes, the C&D waste stream changes. So develop a tracking system to get a handle on where's this material coming from, what kind of projects, who are the big generators. That information is going to be very important. And increasing the tip fees for large C&D waste generating projects, large hotel demolitions, people tearing a house down because they didn't like the way it pointed. And so the lifespan of a house in Pitkin County is around 20 years, and that is well below the national average because people want a new house. So if you're tearing a house down frequently, you might have a higher tip fee.
Yeah, it's-
Inform generators about the advantages of select deconstruction. If you provide an outlet for someone to donate that material is a tax deduction. And so if you can pull out some of the valuable materials before the house comes crashing down, you get that money back. So you don't just have to sell it, you can collect it and donate it, and you still get the benefit.
So can you donate any of that stuff to Habitat? Do they take like windows, doors? They do.
Yep. And sometimes it's as easy as allowing someone to come in and take it out for you. So you just have to allow them. And then providing,
Is that-
what's that?
We need to incentivize that in the building permit.
Right. And then providing additional outlet for building materials. So Pitkin County has very high real estate prices. So a facility to manage these materials locally is difficult. So if the county had a place to do that, that would be advantageous. And so I'd like to open it back to your comments.
Well, I'd just be curious, when you mentioned that the City of Aspen currently has a diversion plan, again, if I go back to that example of the Hotel Lanedo, I'd like to really understand how that diversion plan really worked. We don't know, but anyway, I wouldn't necessarily want to duplicate the City of Aspen unless I'm missing something, because I saw that whole building just get demolished. Good roofing, good siding, good windows, so I don't get it.
Yeah, I know they do. The problem with City of Aspen is space. So they have said, we would love to, but we can't have multiple roll-off containers to sort materials in. So I think that's the problem in the City of Aspen, just being able to sort materials on site. And I think there's some creative efforts that could happen.
So are you is it, from what George's comments and what he saw, they have diversion program for their building permits, but it really isn't enforceable at this time because there's no way to enforce it.
And I think if I have my facts right, well, they require a plan that talks about what the materials are. They don't require that anything particularly diversion-related be done with those materials.
So
It just
that's
tells us about it, but you don't necessarily.
So we actually know what's going into the landfill?
Right.
That's very nice.
So you know, as many of the things we're going to talk about, there are things in place that could be tweaked and made much more effective. And this is, not that Aspen's requirement is silly or a waste, but perhaps with a little bit of tweaking, it could actually be effective
assist
before
in
the
that,
county
yeah.
mimics it.
And I would just say there probably needs to be better coordination between our activities. No pun intended, but there's a tipping point, right? Where the incentives and disincentives, so higher fees at the landfill along with the, lay down areas or whatever it is to allow for these types of activities to take place need to be coordinated between us and our municipalities, and I don't think we've reached that level yet. And I think part of what we need to do is figure out what levers can we pull to reach that tipping point so that when the hotel in NATO comes down, there's both an economic incentive or disincentive that and the ability to carry it through, and then the ability to push it somewhere else for use. And I don't think we've got all the pieces together yet for all our players.
Rachel?
Yeah, really quickly, I think it's a difference between deconstruction and demolition, and if you require the deconstruction, there's a certain level of staging where you're going to go after certain materials at one time with that roll off and then another roll off, but that you have to do it all at once. It only happens when you're truly just doing a demolish, and so there are ways to phase this. But what was I going to say? I think that this would be an appropriate topic for our next joint city-county work session to just begin the conversation that we'd like.
Yeah, I think to begin, because I don't think we have enough time to have anything actually hardcore, but just to let them know we're going to be working on this. And
Yeah, we just have joint meetings quarterly, and to bring this forward to them that, we're starting to look at this issue. This is the life of the landfill. This is how it's going to affect you. And we want to be coordinated better on our policies for the demolition waste, because that's the larger part. But, I'm not sure the city is evaluating or looking at that because they don't manage the landfill. And so it just made sense to me that maybe that'd be a good topic for one of our next joint meetings.
Our next joint meeting is the 22nd.
We won't get into that detail yet, but that's a good idea.
Open it up.
Steve?
Thinking really big scheme, big picture thing, what I see as our only solution if we want to truly extend the life of our landfill, we have to quit burying demolished buildings in there. And if we have to build a thing like WMI has over in the Front Range, where all the material going into the landfill goes up a conveyor belt, every bit of metal is taken out of that, every bit of rock and concrete is taken out of it, every little nail and everything from the construction is all like sucked out and, diverted. And we end up with a small pile of stuff that, like maybe the drywall, maybe that has to be buried, but we need to, I think we should look at some different system where, and perhaps even taking the organic material like the wood construction stuff, maybe that needs to be burned to generate electricity with, or something like that. So I would expand our thinking to not try to extend the life of the landfill 5 more years, and then we still have to end up shipping it to Moab, Utah, or wherever it's going to go. It's going to go perhaps a really long way. Let's try to come up with a solution that extends the life of our landfill forever, that we can divert so much stuff that we can, keep using our landfill forever. That would be my goal.
Forever is a long time until the day it ends. Kathy, we talked about, I don't know where the status is of the expansion of the landfill.
Well, that'll be a big topic next week.
Okay.
So we had some requirements with the state to put the stormwater cover on and the leachate treatment system in place. That's all in place now. So the state's happy, and we will be moving forward with the expansion permitting, late this year, early next year.
All right, great, so we'll see
Can I-
that. Any other questions? Yeah, Patty?
Yeah, kind of on a little shift back to the city again. Have we been furthering our discussions about the Rio Grande recycling split cost issue? We should probably think about that as their budget session starts up. Just to remind them that we would still like to talk to them about that because we think it's an issue of fairness.
Okay.
Brian's going, okay, here we go again. Never hurts to keep asking.
Other questions or comments or suggestions as this was a really good presentation.
Yeah, it was great.
I hope you got some good direction or support from
We do
what
have one more
you're
section.
doing.
Yeah, we have a little more on the hauler.
Oh, you have a little more on haulers. Well, you've got about,
Unless that was a
you've got
subtle,
about, you've
you
got
need to
about
wrap
8
it up,
minutes.
folks.
8 minutes to haul.
Yes. And I think we can make this quick, because as I've mentioned, both Pitkin County already has an ordinance in place, and so does the city of Aspen, but we feel there's great opportunities to make them more consistent and enforce them so they're actually effective. This is all about partnering with the private sector to leverage access to the actual waste generators in the valley, so the homeowners and the businesses, because we're on that municipal side. We spent a lot of time talking to haulers about what works for them. So what we're going to do is create incentives and use their access to their customers and really kind of ramp up our zone of influence, if you will. What we're finding as problems now is that outside of Aspen, and I'm going to forget for a minute that BOCC has a new ordinance that they really haven't made real. They put a late one in 2016. So it's really just Aspen. Outside of Aspen, recycling is a whole nother level of effort. If you want to recycle outside Aspen, you got to get your caller information and call them up and ask them what they do and what the rates are, and then say, oh, that seems kind of high, and call the others, do your cost comparison. And then on top of that, you have to pay extra because it is an additional service. So there's huge disincentives, really. Despite the fact people sign up, it could be, participation could be higher. The inconsistencies that we've talked about just create disincentives. For the generators, obvious reasons. I can do 5 materials in Carbondale, but only 6 in Basalt or 4 in Woody Creek, and and what are they? And the signage looks different, and I'm confused. They use single stream, they don't use single stream. I can't follow it. The haulers themselves are trying to comply with different regulatory programs in every community, and they do a darn good job. I don't want to rag on haulers because they do a great job, but they're still always trying to keep track. So what if we made the whole thing easier and we had better success? And then the last thing that we can't ever, at least up here at this table, we probably can never overemphasize is the need for data. Because we rely on private haulers, they really hold the data, and we really need to find ways to get that, to pry that from their cold hands, because they don't always like to share it because they feel it's proprietary information. But without data, we don't know if we're successful. We can't track our progress. And a lot of the things we bring to you today have an element of guesswork in them because we don't have really good information. So we think we could tweak the solid waste hauler policies to do a better job. So we don't have the confusion that you see in the lovely graphics here. We want to make things consistent and make sense. So we have 3 key recommendations that you folks have heard before, and you've actually alluded to a number of times. And this is just surface level. This is these are the big ticket items, and they have many layers and options for implementation underneath each. But as one of you mentioned, the key component is to require any private hauler in the valley that collects trash now to also provide recycling service to that customer. So that means not just offering it, do you want it? Oh, you don't? Okay, never mind. It means providing the service and charging for it. So the homeowner doesn't have to use it, but they need to pay for it. And that's number one. Number two is to establish a pricing mechanism that Commissioner Richards, you mentioned, that creates an incentive, and tie that pricing mechanism to the actual amount of trash. So what you have is a bundled trash and recycling service. You get both pieces, but the way it's priced is kind of tied to how much trash you generate. So if you're a small trasher, you don't pay as much as if you're a big trasher. And that could mean the size of container you have and/or the frequency you get it collected. So it's a double whammy. I save money by trashing less, and guess what? I can recycle, and my bill doesn't go up, so I can recycle more.
That's
so
what I
it's a
think
double
we've
whammy,
seen
right?
with the city's ordinance.
And that is, yes, and that is primarily applied at the residential level, and that is pay as you throw, variable trash. You heard that before. I don't use that PAYT acronym too much because it's become a four-letter word to some folks who don't know better, but it's hugely effective. We've seen it proven all over the country. And then number three is to tie all of this into the existing annual business license structure that you have in Pitkin County and at the City of Aspen, and just require these things to be proven and reported
We don't have business
at the time of
licensing.
renewal.
Pitkin County doesn't have
Counties
business
are not
license.
allowed by
Your
state
haulers
statute.
do have to have a business license, correct?
Not in Pitkin County.
Am I wrong?
Within the municipalities, yes, but the county does not have the authority to issue business licenses. However, we do have ordinance authority in this area, so we could probably come up with another mechanism.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
get there, but.
either that or
different way.
work with the city so that to be licensed in the city, you're agreeing to do these things in the county as well.
Possible.
You know, it's
I don't know if
possible.
It's legally.
So we felt that using that annual mechanism made some sense. It would make it easier for the haulers. They expect to do this in most municipalities. They would be generally agreeable to it. So there's lots of pieces of the way this could happen. This doesn't get down to the nitty-gritty level of, okay, so are we saying that trash overflows are absolutely prohibited because there's no way to tie that pricing mechanism in? Are we doing the differential rates that you talked about, Rachel? We can't tell haulers what they can charge, but we can codify a pricing structure so that if you've got a small, medium, and large, you have to do a 1X, 2X, 3X, or something like that that creates the incentive we want to see. We can talk about how contaminated loads are handled. We can set a contamination level, and we can require that the tip fee reflect garbage if it's more than that. Right now, the city and the county have different contamination levels, so that's another area of consistency. The other piece that this is likely to do, of course, is drive up curbside service. So our feeling is that if more folks have curbside recycling, there will be less of a reliance on the drop sites and potentially a way for the county to reduce its need to subsidize the drop sites and change that resource allocation, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of pieces there. We feel that the consistency between all governments is key, and we feel that enforcement of these pieces, this just isn't something on paper that 5 years down the road we'll bemoan isn't as effective as we like, but to actually build the enforcement in and think about what that looks like and how it's going to happen between the city and county, separate partnered, and then the public outreach, because the public education piece is so huge, and this gives us a chance to kind of do a new campaign and make it look the same and be, again, effective. So those are the big bullet points there. I'm sure you have questions, but I think it ties in with a lot of the suggestions and recommendations you've already made.
Rachel?
Yeah, just really two comments. Yeah, the biggest issue that I believe the city or the city residents ran into when that went into effect was the issue of having multiple haulers throughout their neighborhood. And so people would be like, there's just too many trucks. But for me, that's a little bit of a homeowners association, or the neighborhoods need to get together and say, should we only have 2 or should we have 5? You know, and it's an individual choice. It's not something we can force on people, but it became an issue with, we just had this truck go through, then we have that truck go through, then we have a third company go through the same neighborhood or every other day, and they just, you know, people got upset about that. But again, that's a residential issue for neighborhoods and HOAs to work through if they can. It also strikes me that I don't know when they're gonna have the next Healthy Mountain Communities, kind of the State of the Valley address, which they have through Colin Laird with Healthy Mountain Communities.
Still even running.
I went to one not long ago. They have them once a year, usually in May or something, but if they had one, we could make this a topic. We could request that be a topic. But it'd be nice to, again, start to get that concurrence between all the different little burgs and neighborhoods about this issue. It might not be a topic for the whole valley. Folks in Glenwood or Carbondale might not be worried about it with where their haulers go, but I can see doing something of greater value up at this end of things.
George, can I take on? I don't know if with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, it's a great resource for us to get information from other mountain communities as to what they're doing, what issues they've seen, what regulations they may have, how they handle any of these issues. We can talk, if you want to talk to me, since I'm the COG rep, we can put it out on the COGs. We did that with our recent Welcoming Communities resolution that we did, and it generated a lot of information, and it's just a great avenue for us to gather that. It also awakens these other communities to, oh, maybe we should be thinking about that. Because I think what we do here is important if we're doing it outside of our jurisdiction, in our region, across the state and across the country, if we really want to look at waste management as a whole. So let me know if we can put together something.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Lori, for coming up.
Great.
And we'll see some of you, maybe all of you, next week.
You're always welcome to come back.
Oh, we'll be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And Kathy, we need to talk about signage.
Let's see. Next, we're going to hear about the Colorado Department of Health Care Policy and Financing Grant for Be Well Mental Health Systems Coordination.
All right, flip the coin.
So we are presenting a supplemental request today. This request is outside of our normal quarterly cycle for supplemental requests because Pitkin County was awarded a grant. And so in order to get going on this grant that we were awarded, we are bringing forward today a budget supplemental request. So Karen and Nan will talk about the program, and I'm here to answer any questions about the budget amounts and the funding for this request. And I will go ahead and let Karen take it over.
Karen Kenneman, Pitkin County Public Health Director. And I think I'm going to ask Nan to talk a little bit about the history of how we got to this point, and then I'll talk about the actual position or contractor that we're looking at bringing on board.
Thank you, Karen. Nan Sundin, Human Services Director. So I think you all know that in the last year, Pitkin County has been thinking about and working on the issue of mental health. And while we have been working on it for years through funding, it came up in the community survey. It was actually the lowest score in the survey about citizen satisfaction that Pitkin County is doing something about mental health. So this was a piece of information for us, and we convened funders together and tried to look at how could we address mental health differently from a funding perspective. In particular, what everyone agreed to was that we could combine our funding, contracts, as well as charitable contributions for mental health and move forward in an RFP process. And in doing that, we have built a collaborative of partners from a wide range of groups, including CMC, the hospital, the ski company, the city, the county, and other groups, the schools. And we moved the ball so far upstream that it actually sort of went beyond my capacity to keep managing, and thank God Karen came on. So we have been collaborating together to keep moving this forward, but the idea came up in this group to create a mental health coordinator to help us advance better outcomes around the issue of mental health. And so that brings us to where we are today. The RFP is out there, and Karen and I drafted a request to HCPF for money.
And so upon reflection, as we heard from community partners, as Nan said, that a mental health systems coordinator would really be helpful in coordinating the folks that are applying for the current RFP, providers that are looking at prevention to aftercare all the way through our community. And so someone who could manage those RFPs, create some shared metrics for our providers, provide TA for them, help them to collaborate together, and really reduce that fragmentation of systems care throughout the community so that people aren't falling through the cracks, and that we know we have a lot of quality providers in our community, but there is a lot of fragmentation between our providers. And so this coordinator contractor position, we were able to leverage some funds from HICPUF and wanted to bring this to you as a supplemental in regard to this broader perspective, that this is really a position that I think will help us to create a reduction in fragmentation within the system of care around mental health and really allow a lot of collaboration between our providers. They can look for and continue to assess gaps as we move forward in our community, and also can look for funding to support those gaps that we're starting to see. So it's within the current RFP that we put out for providers, but it's also a bigger picture of how do we start to look at other gaps that might be occurring and to bring in additional funding to support those, or strategies to support those gaps. So we would like to entertain this supplemental as a way to start to really seed fund to get this contractor position going.
I just wanted to add that Karen and I have done a couple of site visits, one with Summit County, where they have a mental health coordinator embedded in a nonprofit, and Douglas County, where the mental health coordinator actually works for the assistant county manager.
Very good place.
So we reviewed their job descriptions, also talked to Larimer and Park County and some other counties. So we haven't designed anything totally new, right? We're basing it on what seems to be working in other communities that are concerned about the fragmented mental health system.
George, I just note in terms of the supplemental requests right now, we are proposing to appropriate the grant dollars that were awarded. The matching dollars are proposed to come out of the Strategic Initiatives Funds, which are dollars that have already been appropriated, with the idea that things are going to come up during the year that align with the priorities of this board, and that we could use those funds for those types of purposes. So you'll see there's no effect to fund balance in 2017. This will then come back as part of your 2018 budget. We're working with our partners right now to look at opportunities to maybe draw funding for match from some of our partners in the mental health RFP. And hopefully we'll have some good answers for you by the time the 2018 budget comes around. But the risk into next year, as you can see, is pretty small overall.
Patty?
Yeah, I think in discussions when I was campaigning this last time, and discussions following that, and talking to different providers, there definitely is a gap or a confusion, who's on first, who's on second, and where's the field in some cases. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to, it's not just those in need of mental health services falling through the gap, it's those who are providing these services falling through the gap. So I think this is a great way for us to evaluate what we can do, what we need to do, what we've been, the whole picture. So I'm really supportive of us moving this forward, because not only did our citizens say this was a great issue, but it's been a great issue for a long time in this community. So I appreciate this effort to move it forward.
One of the, the main purpose has been stated is to build collaboration between all the different nonprofits that provide these services. My question is, as we look at the Healthy Community Fund for the grantees on that, do we make that a requirement, or do we need to make that a requirement that they participate in this process?
So we've encouraged the primary mental health providers by telling them that the funding is in the RFP and not in the Healthy Community Fund. We're moving it towards this shared place. And as we move into next year, Mitzi and I are really working on, trying to find the secondary mental health providers, and there are a lot of them, right? So the Buddy program is doing mental health, and Family Visitor program is doing mental health, and so many examples of how mental health has spread and is siloed. So we're working on what I would call RFP 2.0 after the detox was 1.0, and 3.0 will be the full Healthy Community Fund. How do we get everybody to really articulate what are they doing for mental health, and how is that different from whatever else they're doing?
Yeah, great, thanks. Rachel?
Yeah, I fully support bringing this forward for all the reasons Patty articulated so well. I think it's very important. And I also think that it sounds like what you're saying, Nan, and through the coordinator, we could perhaps start to work with some of the mental health professionals who are not currently accepting Medicaid patients. And I really think about the cavity-free at 3, which really try to educate folks about how much easier it is to actually get your Medicaid reimbursement. It's often faster than the insurance reimbursement. And even if you just take a small percentage of folks within your program, it will be of great help and assistance to our valley. And so I think that's a key approach. Also, of course, we are anticipating in 2018 moving back into the new county building and perhaps having more of a space for really how that can operate within our community. So I'm all for that. I think it's important. And I also think that there's a certain element of education that's out there that's missing. I feel like people don't understand, and this comes from some family experience as well, that when someone's starting to decline, you don't wait till they've hit rock bottom, or how do you get help, or is it serious enough to get help yet, or maybe are they just lazy, are they just insolent, are they just this way? And it's like, no, I think there's actually something more to it, and I think so a lot of people who might be, I hate to use the word first responders, but your immediate family and your peer group don't necessarily know how to recognize the symptoms of, or think there's something but don't want to be reactionary or don't want to, and so how do we get the community itself involved in understanding, these are the resources and these are how to put people in touch with the resources.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just went to mental health first aid that Mind Springs Health put on for the housing office. I had never been to it. I kind of know mental health because that's my background, but I thought it was an extraordinary class, and the mental health coordinator is someone who can help us have more opportunities to just train your regular people who work besides people who are struggling, who have children, who have parents, who have brothers and sisters. So besides messaging, there's also other things we can do, and having the capacity with the mental health coordinator will help a lot.
I think this is great.
So you're going through an RFP process now. Ideally, when do you hope to have someone online?
We were looking at potentially bringing them on in September. So, in September.
Okay, so next month. Oh, great. Steve?
I see where we might end up with cost savings by having somebody coordinating all the different efforts, and since it is relying on grant money for part of it, and that might or might not be there in the future, I don't think we can necessarily count on it, but we might be able to see some savings in, like, just by having all the different organizations that are applying for healthy community funding, and maybe there's savings there in the future by being so effective and coordinating the activities of the groups, that then the healthy community funding could potentially be our long-term funding for this, for the coordinator.
Yes, most likely. That's a good guess. The HICPUF dollars are one time. So, but they're from July to June. And so we have nice coverage. And we also have come to believe that our partners are willing to contribute to this cause. And there's a lot of money for mental health right now, statewide. Yes, coming through. So, and potentially marijuana dollars. And so, we're just on the cutting edge of being right where we need to be financially.
And Steve, I think it's important to note, at least as staff has approached this, it would be great if those efficiencies did translate into cost savings, but I think where we've set our sights is improving effectiveness, that it may not result in a reduction in the need for resources, but we're certainly hoping for improvement in the effectiveness of how those resources are being applied out in the community.
So we'd be providing, maybe spending the same amount of money, but we'd be providing a better service to the public.
That has been, I think, our thought and goal going into this project. Is it has not been about identifying cost savings opportunities, but effectiveness. And in some cases, we may need to invest a little bit more. This is, and by our way of thinking, a pretty minimal investment, we think, with a lot of upside potential for improving the system effectiveness.
Okay, it looks like we got a nod of heads to go ahead, and sounds great.
When will it be coming back?
Tomorrow there will
Oh,
be.
good, we'll be here. Perfect.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
For your support.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's move on to future agendas.
Yeah, so a few items for you guys on future agendas. We're continuing to work with entities around us to schedule joint meetings. Most recently, we've been reaching out to Garfield County, and it's looking like the schedule time that's aligning best for both of you is September 26th. Right now, that's a Tuesday. You have a work session available that conveniently does not have anything on it yet.
It does now, huh?
In talking to Garfield County, they have proposed hosting us. They would like to meet at noon for up to 2 hours, and they've already provided a menu for lunch if that works for
Is
you
this
guys.
the Garfield County Commissioners?
Correct. Yeah.
Which side of the river?
It'd be on the
On this side.
appropriate side of the river and we thought midday would
office.
be a better time to travel than either morning or evening.
Yeah. So it would be on this side of the river?
Yeah, they're yes.
With the bridge.
We do not have
In
to
their
cross
office.
the
Their
river.
To
Their
get there.
courthouse is on this side.
Okay.
Okay? And
So if that works for everyone, we'll go ahead and firm up those plans and work on an agenda.
Okay, great.
Okay. School board meeting, we're still trying to circle a time on that. They are having a retreat on August 21st, and they said they'll contact us again with dates after that. They were, I think, just like we had a hard time getting a quorum together, they're having a hard time choosing dates. So just know that's still on our radar screen to get set up again, and we'll know more
Who did
about
you
it.
say that was?
The school district, not RE1, yeah.
So back to the 26th, there's an Akron meeting that day, but I can get out in time to get there. So.
That's what we were thinking, we should be able to
that
get
works.
down there. And then we also, it looks like we're firming up that we will have a joint meeting with the city of Aspen on August 22nd. We're going to change up the format of that meeting quite a bit, which is to do something more like what we did with Snowmass, where we'd have a little bit of time to socialize and have dinner together. And then right now what we're envisioning is 2 presentations, which is one, having the city present and talk about their top 10 goals from their retreat that they just completed. They won't have their wording finalized on them yet, but they'll be able to talk about the concepts. I thought that fit in well with us kind of doing a review similar to what we did in our retreat of our priorities, or big rocks as we call them. And then have an opportunity for you guys to have a higher level discussion versus the specific issue-based discussion. And, what are maybe some of the opportunities for us to work together so we can work in things, Rachel, I think, like you suggested, for the landfill, but we may not take a deep dive on it at that meeting versus
Oh, sure,
having
sure.
it
Yeah,
as
no,
an
I-
Bring it in as a
umbrella
rock.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how this change in format came about, but I want the board to know that I was speaking with Ann Mullins about it during her campaign and afterwards, so I'm gonna give her a little bit of credit here for maybe pushing that new agenda for us, because she really thought it was gonna be a great idea to try that.
So right now, that's great, and I think it'll be good to change up how we're having those discussions and
Oh, yeah.
see if it results in a different kind of conversation. So right now, we are looking at doing that at the home, is it Home Team Barbecue?
Home Team Barbecue at the-
the Inn at Aspen,
Unit Aspen.
right on the city
City
county
County
line.
line.
So more to come on that. We're still trying to nail down those logistics.
Okay.
And then also on August 22nd, you'll see a new item that's not reflected in your future agendas right now. We're going to have the consultants from the EA come back and give you a preview of what is going to be in the public meetings coming up in September in Aspen and Snowmass.
For
on
the airport EA.
For the
Where are we
airport
fitting that in?
environmental assessment. We're moving some stuff around, yep.
And just to let you know, on that date, there is no ACRA meeting. The ACRA meeting is the following Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
ACRA meeting is the last Tuesday of the month.
Oh, well, we may take advantage of that
That one,
then.
that's good that you know that.
Yeah, so the 22nd is going to be a pretty busy day, so you'll be seeing some changes to the agenda. And that's all I had for you on future agendas.
Okay, Patty?
I have a question. EOTC meeting, there was at some point tentatively scheduled for September 14th. Did we cancel that?
No, it's on.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was discussion because that's the same day as the RAFTA meeting, so that might be why RAFTA is having a retreat.
Board retreat, right.
Board retreat that day, so there's some discussion about whether we should have that and the EOTC meeting, but there was just, it was too difficult to reschedule everyone once we had penciled that in.
So we need to
and
add
so-
this to the agendas. It's not on here.
Oh, it should be on there.
Yeah, it's
it
on
may
my,
have
it's
come
on my
off.
calendar, but it's not on
You
here.
know what, it probably came off because we had that discussion.
And
so
are
we'll
we
be
having
sure to
one in
get that
October
back
then
on.
too, an EOTC?
We'll also have one in October. That's for budget. And so this next EOTC meeting, we'll have a set of topics that should be teeing up our budget discussion. So we'll,
And October, what do we remember?
I do not remember
Okay,
the
does
date off the
anybody,
top
I think
of
I
my
have it
head.
in here. I would like to know, because trying to plan out lives.
On the September meeting, John, do we know what time that's going to start, the OTC? Is it?
I
Usually
think
4
it's
o'clock.
scheduled 4 to 6, but the agenda for that is going to be pretty full. And so I don't know if we're going to be able to stick to that time frame or not.
All right, well, we can't start earlier.
We can
Right.
run later if we have dinner.
Because of the RAFTA
Yeah.
retreat, yeah. I think the concern is, and I need to check on whose turn it is to chair. I think it might be
that's-
City of
I
Aspen.
think it's the cities.
I think it's the City of Aspen's also, but, you know, on that agenda, what we had anticipate is potentially 4 items. We've got the kind of closing out the discussion on that Upper Valley mobility study. We have the Aspen Institute Transportation Forum that will be presenting their recommendations. The city would like to talk about their mobility lab and how it fits in, I
That's
think,
all
with
scheduled for
those.
the 19th.
Yeah,
Or the 14th.
and then, you know, potentially a conversation just to prep for the October meeting around regional transportation planning and should we have any more robust function around that within the EOTC framework?
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes in terms of timing, because I think that really the idea to have this interim meeting was to be able to dive down a little bit deeper on the upper mobility study, to utilize Parsons on that, and also to have the presentation from the Aspen Institute. That really, it was a focus. So given time or lack of time, these other topics could be moved on to the October agenda.
So we'll be working on that.
Yeah.
And the October meeting is scheduled for the 19th. That's what I have.
It's the 19th.
Rachel?
Yeah,
Chance I might
you
not
know,
be.
I don't know which of the 2 EOTC meetings this topic might fit into, but I think we need to have a little bit of discussion about the larger transportation framework, and that particularly meaning the Intermountain TPR and the Tier 1 projects. And, you know, it's very likely, as we've already put in requests for CCI legislative, to try to get a 2018 ballot measure forward. But I just don't know, from conversations with the city and others, the last time when they said, hey, you know, entrance to Aspen, we're not touching it, we're not going forward with a record decision, we're not doing anything, they realize they're making a 20-year decision if we're left out of that funding stream. And so I think there needs to be a little more awareness, and I'm sure groups like Snowmass will be very interested in finding out that, by the way, what you're living with today, other than whatever reductions can be made by the transportation lab, are what we're going to live with for 20 years worth of growth and commuting workforce and everything. And so I just would like to, at some level, we look micro all the time and manage our little budget, but the bigger budget is going to be the state CDOT budget. And other than the underpass at Buttermilk, we're not programmed for a dime out of that. And it's very likely going to be part of our sales tax revenue streams in a very significant way. I mean, of course, there may be the share back and there may be transportation support, but again, I just would love to see stronger municipal partners helping drive the dialogue at Colorado Municipal League about these sort of things, or just making sure that, you know, we're aware about what it means to not have state funding lined up. And George, of course, is our representative and going with Brian Pettit, but if the city's not in concurrence about trying to get a project on that project list, we're going to be left out in the cold for a 20-year period for funding.
So that's probably discussion for the 19th if possible. We're talking budget.
Yeah, we'll sort of see how that
See how it
agenda.
goes, but again, I think maybe it fits in with the EOTC framework for one of their two meetings.
Yeah,
And even if
yeah.
it's just a brief update on, are you guys aware of the TPR process
Yeah.
and what that means?
And I think it'll fit in potentially to that regional transportation planning kind of conversation, because that is where most communities do that.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we don't fall through the cracks on
Good.
having that discussion.
Patty?
Yeah, I think you've answered most, but this is really ahead of schedule. But looking at the Thanksgiving holiday, and I don't have any idea when we're planning regular meetings, you know, because the regular meeting would fall the day before Thanksgiving, and we usually don't have that. So if you can give me any idea as to what the thought may be.
I thought we already moved those at the beginning of the year to Wednesday, the 1st of November, and Wednesday, the 15th of November.
Okay, I didn't have those. Just want to make sure.
Yeah,
We did,
That's what
yeah.
I got it down,
Yeah.
yeah.
You do, okay, 11:01 and 11:15, okay.
the one that's a little closer to the
where we do
holidays
that
is Christmas,
shift
which
that-
we
Yeah, I
didn't
just want to
check.
make sure what we were, if we were going to back them closer or further, or,
Yeah.
okay.
And we did not change anything up in December. We're still having the regular meeting on Wednesday, I guess it is the first Wednesday of the month instead, the 1st and 3rd, Wednesday the 6th and Wednesday the 20th in
And
December.
then we'll need to have a meeting in there to certify mill levies also.
Yeah, we would do that.
That usually comes the 22nd, 28th.
Right, so that's way out there, as
Oh,
Patty
well,
said.
you
That-
know,
that's-
I had made plans to fly out the 21st, and that Wednesday the 20th would be our last meeting of December.
And so you may, we can't certify until we have the mill levy, so it may be that you won't be here.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done it with three of us
Look, just keep
before.
an eye on your quorum.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, we will.
Okay,
I'm
that
not
close
going
to
anywhere for
Christmas.
Thanksgiving, I'll be out of town, and I'm
Okay.
not sure what I'm
Thank
going
you.
to do.
Okay, anything else on future agendas?
No, nothing for me.
Okay, let's move on to open discussion. John?
We have,
Yeah, so
oh, we're
couple,
ahead.
couple items for open discussion. First, I'm going to hand this around. There was a request from
Oh.
Senator Bennett's office for a letter of support for a bill around allowing flexibility for the Forest Service to partner with local communities on disposal of underutilized administrative lands or facilities, for example, for affordable housing purposes. we had decided not to provide that letter because we did not have proposed legislation. There is proposed legislation that's been reviewed and already introduced, yeah. That Karen and Ellen, Kara Silbernagel and Ellen Sassano have reviewed, and we've produced this proposed letter of support for that legislation.
Perfect.
So if you want to take a few minutes and look at that, we can.
I was just wondering a question you may know about the bill, John. Does it also allow the actual sale of property to local communities for housing purposes, or is it just leasing?
You know, I only skimmed it, so what I saw was leasing, but I have a feeling Kara might be listening. I'm going to monitor my email.
Okay. Yeah, you know, it's not that it's live or die. I'm very happy supporting the bill, but I was under the impression for some reason that it also talked about the Forest Service being able to sell communities some flexibility to deal with their housing problems or other issues. And in the past, and it's quite a while ago, but my experience with the Burnt Mountain Ski Area expansion was when the Forest Service did their environmental impact statement. It's like, well, these are the impacts, this is how much more traffic it'll generate, the need for X many employees, and thank you very much, we can't do anything about that. You know, that's all off-site impacts. And that this would allow some flexibility to be able to provide some land for the affordable housing that goes with the ski area, and not just the ski area lifts and restaurants and guest amenities and things like that. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that. We're kind of built out that way. Yeah. And the Forest Service had a very, you know, tightrope that they were walking about what are guest amenities on the bottom versus giving a lot of land for big commercial enterprises and hotels and things like that. So that's why they had a straight line that's no, no, no. No housing, no government offices, no nothing. And so it'd be good to get a little more detail on this, but again, I'm very happy to support this.
I can tell you that I've got the bill in front of me, at least the press release. This would allow local entities to collaborate with the Forest Service to use existing underutilized facilities or land to address local needs. In return, the Forest Service would be authorized to receive in-kind forms of compensation. And then it goes further on saying that
well,
so it's for leasing, it's not for sale.
She just wants clarification.
Yeah, so underutilized land for leasing, because it's still
currently the Forest Service is unable to lease administrative sites such as housing and storage buildings or vacant parcels outside the forest boundaries, even if they are unneeded or only partially used. So this would allow them to do that, but it has nothing about actually selling off the land.
Okay.
Because there's another process for liquidating, you know, identifying those lands for liquidation. So all I saw was lease, but I want to admit I just did not give it a thorough read. So
thank you. Again, I support the letter going forward.
Real quick, I just want to add, I'd like to put a thank you in there. I think this is great effort. I think this is something that we've seen that other areas in Colorado are seeing. So I think, you know, we support this legislation, but I'd like to put just a quick thank you for proposing this or introducing this bill. Thank yous are always nice.
Yeah, and then you could sign it tomorrow with a...
Yeah, can we do that?
Mm-hmm.
Just not like a paragraph, just a...
Steve?
Russell Senate Office Building is spelled with 2 L's. And we want to have that, we don't want to have a typo right at the beginning that would, the senator might
You might catch
not
that.
read our letter quite as carefully.
Oh, no.
Good point.
Okay.
Okay, so just with a little thank you at the end, and this is good to go?
Yep.
Okay. What
you
else
have
we
more,
got, John?
I have a few real quick.
Wait a sec. I'm just seeing John has any additional.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't.
Oh, you don't know.
Yeah,
Okay,
I guess
thank
I was nodding while you weren't looking. So
I couldn't hear your head rattle.
yeah, usually you can.
I have 2 things. In light of the letters we've received concerning the landfill entrance sign, I didn't know if the board was interested in rediscussing that and maybe pulling it off. Is it something we really want to disagree with at this point with all that we have going on in the county, or is the board comfortable in still moving forward with that?
You know, my comment is that we had a pretty good discussion. I think originally I felt that based on, certainly coming off of today's discussion, based on the future of the landfill in terms of its future use, being a recycling center, being more of a retail center, that I felt that it was appropriate to inform the public, because it's changing from what the landfill, the dump used to be.
Yeah, the dump.
It's become much more of a retail operation, and I thought that was part of our discussion. And so I would still agree with that. The other thing is, well, two other points is, one is, it used to be the dump, but now it's much more. And I think there's a certain amount of, and it's not probably the most pleasant place to work. It's dusty, it's noisy, it's smelly. And I think coming from staff, a nice signage for the entrance is probably a source of pride for the workers there.
That's a great point, George.
So I think that's important. And finally, you know, when I make a decision, I usually, in the back of my mind, I have to think about how I would defend it, because we're never going to please everybody. And so I'm not really that concerned about a few letters to the editor. They had misinformation. They talked about the misuse or the misappropriation of tax dollars.
They're not.
It's not tax dollars. It's coming from the landfill, which is an enterprise fund. So, you know, you have to sort of I take these letters to the editor with a grain of salt, but my decision would still to move ahead and support the signage.
Yep.
Other thoughts, Steve?
My one concern about the landfill sign issue is the fact that we are exceeding the Pitkin County sign code, and we're kind of opening ourselves up for, in the future, other people along the highway coming to us and saying they want to put a sign there for whatever purpose. And it puts us in a difficult, or could put us in a difficult situation in turning them down, because it doesn't meet the Pitkin County sign code when we allowed our own department to put up a sign that exceeded the size. So that really is my main concern, is just future applications from people wanting to put up their sign, and we could end up potentially with the kind of issue where Bugsy Barnard went out with his chainsaw wanting to cut signs down.
Those were billboards. But just in response to that, we had that when the airport sign was first built too big, and we scaled it down. It still was outside of the county's code. And we had people coming in at the ABC who wanted signs, and we said there's a difference between public signage, so people have a way to public facilities. So I don't really have a problem with the size. I do appreciate the clarification for the public that it is not quote-unquote taxpayer dollars. I think that's important. George, your point, I did not really even think about, but a sense of pride for the people who work there. I appreciate the aesthetics of the sign, and I think the size is necessary. Why do it if you can't see it? So I'm comfortable moving forward. I just wanted to bring it back to the board in response to the letters we received and the letters to the editor. So I just wanted to have that discussion.
Rachel, you have comments?
I wasn't here for that discussion. I have gotten concerns. I appreciate you bringing it up, Patty, and your responses, George. I understand that they did reduce it in size from the original proposal that came forward. And I do share, as I did at that point in time, that this is something that a lot of new residents to our community, guests, short-term visitors will be looking for, that center and that use, as opposed to those of us who kind of quote know it's there. And it's a challenge, but I think it's probably the right thing to do, to keep the current sign and to move it forward.
And the other thing, George, is it'll be coming back to us as part of the land use decision-making. So this discussion could happen
There'll be
again.
one more chance to
Does
look
come
at it
back
or
to
not?
us?
It doesn't come back to you as a board, but it will go through a
The process.
location and extent review
So if there is
process.
anybody who's,
Yeah.
there's still a time for public input, but I'm comfortable, I just wanted to bring it out there, discuss what we'd heard and just confirm it again.
All right, good, thanks, Patty.
I have
You
one
had
other-
something else, yes?
Yeah, one other thing. In light of the city's recent decision about the age of purchasing tobacco and their concerns, I didn't know, I think that I would like to have a discussion at the county level because I appreciate what the city's doing enormously. My father did succumb to cancer from smoking since he was age 11. I don't want to just push those underage to the airport business center to purchase their cigarettes there. You know, it's just a little bit down the road. And also what kind of tax revenue the county currently receives. We don't have a lot of retail selling that. And if so, if we felt we needed to then kind of follow the city's lead on taxation for the cigarette products, I just think it's a discussion we should have because our borders are here.
John, clarification?
So that's actually, I can answer all those questions
best.
as it turns out. Something that we've looked into because we were approached by the T21 group. We collect between $14,000 and $16,000 a year, so it is less in those tobacco taxes. The real challenge is that as a county, we don't have the same legislative ability that the city does.
So we couldn't do it.
And so in looking into it with the attorney's office, you know, I had concerns about whether we had any statutory authority to do that. We checked in with our attorney's office. John Ely agreed that we do not have statutory authority to
Either to do
that.
one or the other, we can't do the age limit and we can't do taxation?
We right now, we don't have, you have the ability to do the taxation we'll need to double check on. You mean whether we could just
Yeah.
increase?
Well,
tobacco
because
tax?
if you save X amount of dollars to go
Yeah.
to the ABC to buy your cigarettes,
So that's a separate question. I think we'll have to look into. The first question about whether we can
The age
regulate
limit,
the
we
age,
can't.
no. And, you know, that's something that we shared with the T21 folks at that time, but we can take a look. I don't know about the
you know, if we see an
taxation
increase
question.
in the sale at the ABC, then it's something we might want to consider in the future. You know, the cities are really trying to do, I believe, what's good for public health, and I don't want it just to be pushing that, just, at that city-county line, so.
We did work with Karen Kenneman to provide a opportunity for T21. Dr. Levin has been a big
Right.
advocate for this, and she was able to present to CALFO, which is the Public Health Officers Association, and talk about, the possibility of pursuing this at the state level. If we had legislation at the state level, then we could do that.
Just something I wanted to bring up and talk about. I did run into Jim True today, and he said, if we're doing it in the city, because I asked him about it, and so I just think it's something we should keep an eye on and maybe discuss at a future time. I just wanted to bring it forward.
Good, thanks, Patty.
Yeah, just kind of along those lines, that's when we talked a little about CCI legislation and priority. We talked about should we push for the ability for the county to be doing business licenses. And we don't have the infrastructure set up to begin to do that. There might be some value to it in a broader sense beyond this that would be worth looking at, but it does take legislative change to
We'll see where
statutory
it goes
authority.
with the
Because
public
that's
health.
the scheme under which the city is able to do this, is to say, if you want a retail business license and you're gonna sell this product, you have to abide by these rules, and they're able to do that as home rule. I do think it's a valuable tool as well. I'm glad you brought it forward to keep a track and keep an eye on it. The younger you start any habit, the harder it is to quit that habit.
Yeah.
And so
For future
that's,
discussion.
that's a challenge. In terms of other items for open discussion, I have seen that there are new items that we need to make comment on. Public comment, particularly the Clean Water Act, is now up for review. I believe I sent a kind of an alert that I'd gotten from some nonprofit groups to John Ely and Cara, and it's just amazing that they're doing very, very short turnaround, 21-day, 30-day public comment period on documents in law that's that thick. But we do need, I would believe, to make some comments on the clean water repeal rollback. And the other, John, I'm really hopeful that we can have our staff, perhaps through senior services, track what are the budget proposals as they shape up this fall for Social Security and senior services.
The federal.
Because at least the House committee bill had a $200 billion cutback in Social Security over the next 10 years. And we know how many of our residents depend on Social Security. We know what the aging and gray wave is coming forward. And while the president campaigned on never touching that, it's different than what Congress is proposing in their current budgets, and they're trying to cut folks who've depended on these for a long period of time. So I think it's up to us to really track that, and it would be most appropriate for our senior services director to be on top of it and get us letters that we can send to Representative Tipton and Steve. I know that to the extent you guys are tracking that federal legislation, anyone who can add input would be valuable. But just to be able to send something to Congressman Tipton and be able to talk about the specific needs within our community, because we know how many people are already on Social Security and how many people anticipate being on Social Security in future years, and that any change in how they do the annual cost of living increases will affect us, as well as other potential cutbacks and cutbacks in Social Security disability income as well. So I don't have the direct line on those the way I do on perhaps some other issues.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would be senior services, but let's look at how we
just
that.
who, because again, the budget process goes through so many different steps with the feds, and it just is one committee at this point, and all the wrangling that goes on there. I think it's something that we're going to have to watch closely, as we saw several years back when the federal government was shut down over the debt ceiling. And the debt ceiling debate is coming up in the end of September, and that was the peak of viewing season for maroon bells. So we had people just trying to get up there, and all these Forest Service assets were closed off. And so that I'd hate to think that might happen coming forward. So that's my major one. The other one is I think I've gotten a phone call, which I passed along, and then also an email about taking a site visit to the Redstone Castle before voting on their special events permit. And I do apologize. I understand the board discussed this a bit, at least while I was out of town on another business meeting. But I think that would be valuable to do. I'd like to see if we could at least line up individually, if not as a group, for some site visits before we make the decision on them having a special events permit.
That application is actually a little more complicated than just a special event permit.
Okay.
It's also part of a request for a change in zoning or a change in a land use ordinance. So special events is tied into that, but that's only one component of it.
Well,
not to say that it wouldn't be worth a site visit, but it's a little more complicated than just.
Well, and that's why I haven't looked and read the topics of our land use future agendas. But if there's other larger issues, then I really think we need a site visit.
Well, and I agree, and I don't know if we've talked about it as a group, but I think we need to do it as a group because it's an item before us, and I think it'd be more appropriate for us to do it as a group than individually. I'm not even sure if individually would be allowed.
Yeah, so it was an item that was brought up,
Last week?
No, it was several weeks back. There was a request, and at that time, I think the discussion was not to do a site visit, but if the board would like to revisit that, we can certainly get something scheduled. I think I'd just be looking for direction.
Well, I think not the problem, but the concern is that now we're hearing from the people in the community that they would like us to do a site visit. We hadn't had that input prior.
Well, we're hearing from one or two people who
But that's still people in the community.
who have a bias. So.
Well,
It's a big deal, and whatever decisions are made will last for a long time, whatever conditions or mitigations that may be necessary. I think you see those from a site visit. It's on our Wednesday, the 23rd meeting. So, if there's a way to work in something before then, I think it'd be valuable.
I would like to do a site visit.
Well, you can try to set a date and see if it works for
Okay,
people.
See who can go.
Yeah,
At
that's
least
fine.
that's what we can do, we can try.
That's fine.
You know, I will say two things. I'm not doing anything on Monday, the 21st, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime solar eclipse that I think we should all see. But if we could do it the morning of the 16th, Wednesday the 16th, that would be available, or even potentially Monday the 14th.
Why don't we just see what we can work out and throw out some dates. The 16th,
Is a Wednesday, we don't have a regular meeting.
we have an Abbey District open house that afternoon.
Yeah, so if we got down there and did it early that morning,
Just figure out some dates and throw
that'd be
them out.
valuable.
Okay,
Wednesday, the 16th, does that work for people?
it works for me, but if we do, I mean, then we have the,
I'll throw out the 14th and 16th as potentials, and
See what we can line up.
Yeah.
is that not?
No, but I'm saying, but we're talking next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quick.
Yeah.
I need to check on staff availability too.
And also with the carvers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else on open discussion with anybody? So we will take a break then until 3:15, when we'll come back for a special meeting. We will not have an executive meeting this afternoon. That was on there by mistake.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So no
And
exec.
I just appreciate keeping the special meeting set at 3:15, because I know members of the
Yeah,
public
no,
are planning to
absolutely.
be here.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so back at 3:15.
Great.
Grassroots, we're on a break.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to call to order a special meeting, and this is for the purpose of a emergency ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, prohibiting electric bikes on Pitkin County trails. And John will probably just need a little clarification, because they already are currently prohibited on Pitkin County trails.
Yeah, that's correct, George. The emergency ordinance that is in front of you and up for consideration by the board today is really an ordinance that is designed to continue the current state of regulation of e-bikes in light of a new state law that will be going into effect as of tomorrow. Back in April, the state passed House Bill, let me just look at my notes here, 171151, which did a number of things. It provided a definition, classification of e-bikes into 3 different classifications. It has certain requirements on manufacturers for labeling and that the labeling of the e-bikes would be maintained. And I think most pertinent to today's discussion is that it took 2 of those classifications of e-bikes, what's called a Class 1 e-bike and a Class 2 e-bike, and basically defined them as bicycles, allowing them on all trails that are otherwise open to bicycles and pedestrians. Right now, that is different than the management plans for trails that exist in Pitkin County. Pitkin County does have the the Pitkin County Open Space and Trails Board policy pertaining to other power-driven mobility devices, which is basically limits the use of what would be the equivalent of these Category 1 e-bikes to those who are mobility impaired on Pitkin County trails. The new state law that goes into effect tomorrow would change that condition. Really, the purpose of the ordinance in front of you that continues the prohibition on e-bikes, with exception of those who are mobility impaired, is really designed to give our community an opportunity to have a more thorough public policy discussion about if e-bikes should be allowed, what categories should be allowed, and where they should be allowed in the future. That conversation is going to take some time. I think there are a lot of different views out there in the community about the appropriateness of e-bike use on county trails and different types of county trails that will take a significant amount, I think, of public outreach, an opportunity for public comment and deliberation by both the Open Space and Trails Board in terms of their management plans, but also by this board in terms of any overarching policies about the use of e-bikes on county trails. And so really the purpose right now of this prohibition that is proposed is to continue the existing policy framework that currently exists in Pitkin County in light of the state law that was recently passed, and to give time then for a more robust and thorough public discussion and consideration of policy regarding e-bike usage in the future. We can go through the different classifications. I don't know if the board has not had an opportunity to fully review this policy at this point. So what we can do is give you an opportunity to take a look at this and answer questions, or we can go into greater detail about what specifically this ordinance does.
So, Open Space and Trails, the Board of Trustees, they put together a management plan, as they do with all of their acquisitions and conservation easements for trails. And that was done several years back, and it was sort of a generic language stating that all e-bikes were prohibited on county trails. Because of this new law, it actually breaks e-bikes into different classifications: Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Class 1 is sort of your classical pedal, where it's electric assisted, and those bikes have the capacity to go up to 20 miles an hour, probably faster downhill. Class 2, you actually have a throttle, so it becomes even a little bit easier, and those bikes have the capacity to go up to 28 miles an hour.
Class 2 actually has the ability to go up to 20 miles
Up to 20
per
with a
hour.
throttle, so, but you don't have to actually exert hardly any energy, and then Class 3 up to 28. So since Open Space, when they did their management plan, they did not have these classifications in that management plan. This is a reason to just clarify now that continues to be prohibited, and it includes these classes. And it will also allow Open Space and Trails, and I'll ask Lindsay to speak to this, to start what they do very well, which is an open, transparent process where they invite the public comments to look at this particular issue and then decide where they want to go. It may be an opportunity for some trails to be utilized. It may be opportunities to determine what regulations need to be added to it.
Yeah.
So it's a process that will happen, starting with open space and trails, and as important, when we look at the Rio Grande Trail, which is probably undoubtedly the most popular and the most heavily used trail, it's even more important that we have this opportunity to have a discussion with RAFTA, because RAFTA is responsible for about 50% of the trail. About 50% of the trail is in Pitkin County, about the other half is in RAFTA. So, and I'll be presenting in RAFTA, this will be on RAFTA's agenda this Thursday, and I'll be asking them to do a similar prohibition to allow time for all the entities to have a good, open public discussion and to find and to come up with a cohesive plan for the entire corridor.
So can I just clarify that real quick? You will be asking RAFTA if the board supports this moratorium.
No.
You're going to ask it on your own if the board
no,
doesn't support this?
It's on the RAFTA agenda regardless.
But
And,
I just want to be clear, if this board today determines not to support this,
regardless, it's on the RAFTA's
right, but will
agenda.
you be supporting what this board supports or your own?
Well, we'll sort of see how this goes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we,
And George, before we go too far into process, I think one of the challenges and one of the reasons that we're proposing this moratorium to give time for that policy discussion and Snowmass has.
I have to interrupt you. It's not a moratorium.
I'm sorry, it's not a prohibition on the use
Yes.
of the, really continuing the
Using them.
prohibition on the use of these. You know, Snowmass has recently done the same thing, RAFTA will be doing it, and I think it's with the same idea. The paved trails in particular tend to cross jurisdictional boundaries. You know, the Rio Grande Trail goes from Aspen all the way down to Glenwood and passes through City of Aspen and unincorporated Pitkin County and Carbondale and so on and so forth. You know, RAFTA has jurisdiction at some point there. That it's important for all the entities to be synced up. And so, you know, I don't see that the process will just be an open space and trails led process. We'll be looking for some kind of process that brings the various jurisdictions together so that somebody who starts on an e-bike in Aspen doesn't encounter a different set of rules, for example, as soon as they hit the county boundary or as soon as they hit the
Eagle
RAFTA
County.
portion of the
Basalt.
trail. And so Open Space and Trails definitely has it on their radar screen to prioritize participating in that conversation, but we're still working with the entities to figure out who would take lead on those trail.
can I just, point of clarification? I'm confused. The agenda item summary does say it's a moratorium. Now we're saying it's an ordinance, not a resolution. So can we just have clarification on what we're actually doing here?
Ryan, you want to talk to that? Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, Richard Neely, Assistant Pitkin County Attorney. Patty, it was originally drafted as a resolution and as a moratorium. It has since been changed because there's no end date in the
Right.
prohibition. It is no longer considered a moratorium. You'll see that it does, it has been changed to an ordinance, but it does still include resolution number at the top of this, so we'll get that cleared up when we take it down to Jeanette.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification because I am concerned about not having an end date. I would like to, and I can address that in further comment, but yeah, I was a little more comfortable with an actual moratorium where we had an end date, so we wouldn't just let this drag on for years. We'd actually come to some resolution firmly with information not too far in the future. But I'll discuss that later.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
Rachel?
Yeah, perhaps you'll cover this in your conversation, but I did have a few questions I'd like to ask. The new state law doesn't specify paved or unpaved trails?
Correct, that's my understanding. It's really just designating bike.
So this is the potential for e-bikes on any county
Right.
unpaved trail, whether it's Smuggler Mountain or what we might think of as a hiking trail now, and perhaps hasn't been graded, and the corners, you know, when somebody's mountain biking, they're doing one thing, and they know what they're doing coming downhill on some of these single tracks, but this would allow the electric bikes on any trail. That's a.
Yeah, open space and trails still has no e-bikes in our regulations. The state law was really defining the difference between a motorized and an e-bike.
Okay.
That was probably the
On
bigger
any
change.
trail.
But on any trail, that's kind of my point, is that, well, many of us may have in our mind the Rio Grande Trail for obvious reasons. It really is opening up a lot of potential backcountry trails and other access areas that, again, may or may not be really suited for what I would think of as more of a street bike. At least most of the electric bikes I've seen are not the heavy suspension type of models like mountain bikes, where people really are going for that mountain biking experience. And so
They do make mountain bike e-bikes, though.
they do make mountain e-bikes though now. So, but it would be all trails, isn't this? We're not just talking paved trails.
And it, you know, the state law does not change the federal definition of a motorized vehicle, and so that's another
Forest Service
potential
lands.
area. Forest Service and BLM, e-bikes are still considered a motorized
Yeah.
vehicle.
You know, I kind of see a lot coming from this change that we may not have considered all the implications, particularly in terms of enforcement. We know we've had to up significantly our open space and trails personnel over the years just for enforcement on county trails already, whether it's a dogs on leash issue, whether it's a wildlife closure issue, or things like that. And so I see us really needing to develop a full enforcement for safety type and for wildlife considerations to go along with this as it's implemented as time goes forward. The other thing that really concerns me is potential county liability for the safety of trails. And if you end up with a lawsuit because this turn was at this degree angle on this trail, which we've never considered to be, you know, something of an issue, again, because it's mountain bikers who are looking for the more strenuous activity, or even Sky Mountain Park comes to mind for me in terms of the different times a year we have wildlife closures. But, you know, when a county takes over an older road, like a 2477 road, it may have been built in one condition, but now that the county has declared it a public road, you suddenly are liable for whether the turns have enough sight line, whether there's enough wide clearance, whether there's runoff areas, shoulders. And so that's a consideration that I have about, have we reviewed our county trails for potential liabilities? I think it's worth pointing out that the city has a speed limit of 20 miles per hour for cars in town if they're not on Highway 82, where it's 25. But that, you know, this Class 3 bike particularly can go 8 miles an hour faster than the city speed limit for cars. And so you start wondering, how's that enforcement going to happen, even on roads? Because as we look at this, for me, it is a change, and it's something that bicycles can go on roads as long as they obey the rule of the road and things like that. And yet I'm constantly seeing bicyclers who change from I'm a car, I'm a pedestrian, I'm a car, I'm a pedestrian, about how they manage their travels and whether they run stoplights or pause for a stoplight or pause for a stop sign or not pause at all because that sense that I don't have to. So, you know, again, in terms of safety for some of our younger people on the trails and don't realize that here's a bike coming forward and it's going 20 miles or 25 miles per hour. And how do we get speed detention radars down on the trails now? How do we do this? So I simply don't know, but I see a lot of issues, and the county liability and insurance for creating trails is suddenly in play in a way that it hasn't been before.
Lindsay, would you talk a little bit about the process that Open Space and Trails currently uses and how they, I forget when this was first put into place, and how you anticipate the discussions going forward with Open Space and with the other jurisdictions?
That was July 21st, 2011.
Yeah, the OPDMD plan was a response to ADA laws changing, and so that plan's an old plan that's due for an update. I'll say that. But no matter what, when we change, if we look at changing the way that something is managed, whether that means a change in the rule or the change in anything really in that property, we go through a public process so that everyone has the opportunity to comment on it prior to it being changed. So our goal is to work with all of our partnering agencies, so the different cities and RAFTA, and potentially the other counties if they want, about looking at trying to create a seamless system for management purposes. So looking at having a cooperative process that ends up with one regulation that governs the trail, the Rio Grande in particular. But there's other trails. The Brush Creek Trail goes in and out of jurisdictions, east of Aspen Trail. So there's other trails in play for sure.
Mountain Park.
But also
Yeah, and
included,
then all the
also
mountain-
included in that is not just the users, but say the local providers, people who rent bicycles, mountain bikes, e-bikes, et cetera, also need to be part of this discussion. I think that's key.
Yeah.
Steve?
I am the owner of an electric bike that I've had for a few weeks now, and one of the reasons I got it was so I would have personal experience on what it's like to ride one, so I could use it for commuting down to the RAFTA bus and then being able to get home at the end of a long day and not be exhausted from the bike ride up the hill to my house. So I have, like at least one of the members of the audience, have totally fallen in love with my electric bike because it makes it possible for me to bicycle a lot more than I was able to in the past.
Which class do you have? 1, 2, or 3?
Well, I didn't even know there were 3 classes of bikes until all this stuff came out in the newspapers, and mine happens to be a class 2 one. It has a little throttle on it, which I tried using one time, and I don't really like it. I could disconnect it, and I'd be perfectly fine and have mine be a class 1. But I want to tell some of my experiences. The bike has a speedometer on it, which I think every bike should have a speedometer on it because it's very interesting to find out how fast you're going on a bike. Going down Capitol Creek Road, I don't use the electric assist. I don't need it going downhill. And I actually I'm going more than 30 miles an hour on portions of Capitol Creek Road going downhill. On the flatter places going downhill, I am going about 25 miles an hour typically. And if I were riding down the Rio Grande Trail on the downhill part, I would be going just pedaling with my own power. I would be going about 25 miles an hour. When you have the electric assist turned on and you're pedaling, when you hit 20 miles an hour, the electric assist stops immediately. You can feel the difference. If you're going 21 miles an hour, you're not having any electric assist. So that made me realize that the issue on a bike trail would not be the fact that it's an electric thing, but it has more to do with the speed of the bicycle and whether the bicycle passing a pedestrian or horse announces themselves. The electric bike, I can't even hear mine running. The electric part is completely quiet, even to my ear riding right on it. And I think the issue of safety on our trails has to do with the speed of the bicycle and the trail etiquette that the bicycler uses, and not on the fact of whether it's electric assist or a regular bicycle. I've been walking on some of our trails when a bicycle goes bombing by you, and you don't even hear them coming. They're coming so fast, and if they don't announce themselves, it's very frightening. And I understand the concern of people who are going more slowly, having people blow by them. So I think actually we need perhaps some different rules relating to all trail users in terms of announcing themselves when they're passing, which side of the person they're passing on, maybe having a speed limit. And I notice on the recital number 8, it talks about, it says that electric assisted bicycles are a safety hazard for pedestrians, cyclists, and equestrians due to their speed and mass. And having studied physics in high school and college, I looked up the equation again. Momentum equals mass times velocity. If you have a bicycle going 30 miles an hour, a regular bicycle going down a bike path at 30 miles an hour, they're going to have more momentum, even though the bike might be lighter, than an electric bike that is at the maximum going 20 miles an hour, and even though it has more mass, the bicycle could be going so much faster that it would be more of a safety hazard for other trail users. So I think, there's some issues that we need to look at more carefully. I actually was in reading what was in our packet, which was the moratorium that we were talking about, which would have an end date on it. I don't like the idea of passing something with no end date to it. I would rather have it be, for a 1-year period, and at the end of that time, we need to revisit it, because I really do think we need to have this discussion with the Open Space and Trails Board, with the general public, with the RAFTA board and the other different municipalities, because we do need to have a unified rule for instance, along the Rio Grande Trail, so one doesn't have one rule and then somebody gets to the town line and then they're not allowed to go on the county part of the Rio Grande, for instance. We need to have a unified rule. So I agree with the idea of right now having this, carrying the prohibition forward, but we also need to have a timetable where we're actually having these discussions with the other entities and coming up with a unified approach. Long term, I think electric bikes should be allowed for commuting on certain trails, and that would be, I don't want to go through the whole list, but there are certain trails that are like the Rio Grande Trail and maybe parts of the Owl Creek or Brush Creek Trail that are useful for people to commute in and out of town. We have a car problem in Aspen. We don't have an electric bike problem. And if more people are riding electric bikes and getting rid of their cars or leaving them parked at home, and that's my intention, is to replace a car in our family by having one electric bike replacing a car is my goal, actually. I think electric bikes really have a place in our transportation mix of how people get around here, and we need to, there's going to be more and more of them, and we need to come up with, the right guidelines and on where they can be used and how fast bicycles on the trails are actually allowed to go, including regular bicycles and all those sorts of things. So I really want to have our discussions not put off way into the future, but have this be the start of the discussion, and we, in a very timely basis, be having the meetings with all the different entities and working on where we're going for rules. So I was all in favor of voting for the moratorium. I'm not certain how I'm gonna vote yet on this, the ordinance with the complete prohibition.
So, again, just for clarification, e-bikes are currently prohibited on all open space and trails, period. That's in the management plan. So they're already prohibited. So we're not changing anything. We're just addressing the new classifications that the Colorado law has come up with. So there's no changes. They are prohibited. We're not going to change that here at this table, but those discussions are timely. They will be happening this fall. And so the management plan never had a moratorium on it. E-bikes are prohibited.
They're not prohibited for people with disabilities.
Disabilities.
Yeah, thank you. That's the only exception.
And that's still true.
And that's
in
still
this
true.
That's
That's
still
not
true.
changing
That's still
from
true.
the other power derivative.
So all we're doing is clarifying that because the state has now come up with 3 different classes, we're just clarifying that those classes still are prohibited based on our management plan.
The state is saying they are allowed
Yes.
unless we, to me, things change tomorrow. If our prohibition would end tomorrow
It would-
unless we reenact it.
But
It would
you
not.
know,
It would not. It would not end.
if I could, I find this to be very similar perhaps to the marijuana licensing and retail locations licensing, when the state passed the broader law that said marijuana recreational sales are legal within the state, but yet they gave individual jurisdictions the ability to control and moderate and regulate that as they see fit for the health, safety, and welfare of their residents. But I take both the concern that you're saying about not having an end date in this realistically, and I think that it wouldn't be that difficult to add something to it to say shall be in effect until May 1st, 2018. And then if for some reason it's not sufficiently sorted out by then, we would have another hearing and extend it further, or it would expire of its own accord. Basically a sunshine, or isn't that the right term?
A sunset.
A sunset provision in this. So I think the concern that it doesn't drag on forever could be addressed by adding a sunset to this law, but still giving the time for the appropriate discussions to occur.
I guess I have a question for Ryan. In that case, what Rachel is suggesting is that we can change what is currently part of our open space and trails management plan.
No, I'm suggesting that we pass this, that it have a date of May 2018, and it
Reconsider.
continues to uphold what is in our management plans until a new plan or recommendations come forward, and then we would look at a more permanent rule, one way or the other, or which specific trails are under specific conditions. I'm just saying we can accommodate the fear and the concern that I think is legitimate about something that doesn't have an end date.
Can I just make, because we had this conversation at the staff level, George, and I think in our management plans on trails, we mention e-bikes particularly in those management plans.
We have 2 things really going on. One is specific regulation that includes the specific language that says no e-bikes. And then we also have an OPDMD plan that designated the trails either open, closed, or restricted. And restricted meant OPDMDs were allowed for mobility impaired individuals. And those restricted trails are really the paved trails. So no matter what, currently our regulations and management plans, all single track soft surface trails are closed to e-bikes and OPDMDs.
And since e-bikes were called out, but they did not have the classification, it's not clear that anything would change in those management plans, but we thought it was better with the state law going into effect tomorrow. it was a safer path to take to maintain the current state and the integrity of those management plans, to go ahead and do an ordinance directly in response to this legislation and calling out the categories of bikes that are defined in that legislation, so that we wouldn't have the kind of gray area question I think that you just posed. Now, Rye, I don't know if you guys in the attorney's office have had an opportunity to discuss that, but I think it was unclear, that because e-bikes are mentioned in the management plan, that they probably continue to be prohibited. But we are concerned about a lack of clarity for the public.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that's correct. I think we would still have to, if we wanted to allow e-bikes on various trails, we would still have to address the prohibitions in the current management plan.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of evolving technology, a lot of, obviously, about e-bikes. I think we need to take time so we have the right decision made at the end of the day to provide for use where it might be appropriate, and for use, and to not provide for use where it would be inappropriate. I think we need to continue, of course, with the disabilities so that people can use them, because I think that's important. But I do want to see a time frame. I don't want this to go on. I know Open Space has a lot on their agenda, their plate for this next year, but this is evolving now, and I think we need to address it in a comprehensive manner between the city of, through the jurisdictions valley-wide, so that, again, as we've said multiple times already this afternoon, we don't want to have somebody have to get off and do what with their e-bike when they hit the Basalt city limit, And I think it's wise for us to do what we're doing today. Thank you, Rachel, with an addition of a time frame. I think spring, and if we haven't been able to address it then, at least we have, I know it puts the pressure on, but we're gonna be feeling the pressure from the other jurisdictions. They're already moving on it, and I don't wanna be behind the eight ball. I wanna be with them at that, and I think that's important, and I support the spring date, and I can move forward on that. I think it's going to make for a better decision for everybody at the end of the day if we take our time, get the information, and think about this.
I'm still a little confused, Ryan. If we place a moratorium on this particular ordinance.
Not a
This isn't a
moratorium,
moratorium,
it's a
just a
sunset date.
sunset on the
Well,
prohibition.
I heard the word
No,
moratorium.
no, it's a sunset date on the ordinance, so the ordinance would expire, or
Okay, that's
May
fine.
1st,
So-
we can
so-
continue
So
it.
when if the ordinance expires and we haven't come up with a new policy, the existing policy of our open space and trails management plan still takes effect as prohibits e-bikes.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, okay, so we're just, it's sort of academic.
Well, it's because now we're concerned that if we don't do something before the state law kicks in, we will lose our opportunity to have local control.
No, that's not true.
Well, it could
that's
be
what-
a lawsuit as to whose rules matter. I mean, if the state has jurisdiction over the larger issue, it might supersede our rules. That's why this is even coming forward. If we could just rely on our management plans already,
That
we
was-
would be.
That's my understanding when I talked with the other assistant county attorney, was that's why we're doing an emergency ordinance today at a special meeting, because I was not at the meeting on the 1st, and so this caught me totally off guard.
Okay.
Question for
Ryan, do you want
Lindsay.
to respond to that?
I'm not sure where we are. I think that Rachel is correct that there would be a question about jurisdictional, who can control what, but I do think that there were certain things in the management plan, the current management plan, with regard to the classification of vehicles that are not, and Lindsay can correct me if I'm wrong, there's certain things in the management plan regarding the classifications of different e-bikes that are not currently addressed by what Open Space and Trails has in place at the moment.
Right.
So, and I think this was, the intent of this was to address that
Correct.
gray area in that
Correct.
respect.
And to keep the door open for jurisdictional control.
And it
Right.
ensures that then we maintain control, this community maintains control of the broader policy discussion, that we're not spending time in the gray area or confusion that's created there, but that we can have a policy conversation going forward that, aligns. I do think, Patty, to your point, this is a disruptive technology.
Yeah.
It's a disruptive technology. And so you're going to have passionate arguments on various sides of this issue. And, you know, any good public policy discussion is going to provide the opportunity for those positions, concerns, benefits to come forward, and then for you guys to balance those in a policy statement going forward. All we were trying to do with this emergency ordinance is clarify and make clear for everyone that the status quo in Pitkin County is not changing until that conversation takes place. And that's what this was aimed at accomplishing.
And ensuring our ability to have that conversation and with a meaningful end.
Yeah. George?
Steve was up, and then Rachel.
A question for Lindsay. I mean, the date May 2018 was tossed out there. I'd be okay with a year from now or something later.
I mean, the conversations.
Given OST's schedule and things you have on your table, how realistic is it for you to, you know, by next spring having had these discussions versus by next August having had the discussions?
Yeah, the conversations we've had with the staff from the other jurisdictions and agencies was that we wanted to have it addressed by the next summer season. So, I mean, speaking for open space, I think that is doable. Things that make a process take a bit of time is working through all the different partnerships in different jurisdictions. But the goal was by the next summer season, so 2018 summer.
Yeah.
We could move it to June 1st.
Sure.
It could be any of those. I was just thinking about when
May, but
when the trail is starting to get clear in the Rio Grande and people are using it. So that's why I had suggested that, and to have something settled by next summer season, frankly, was what I was looking at. Is it okay to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. You know, within this ordinance are the words of art that we all look at all the time in our decision-making, and that is the health, safety, and general welfare of the public. And this, I think, really brings all of those together to a head. It does remind me very much about marijuana prohibition, marijuana licensing, and there was a point at which we were behind the curve, and we had applications coming in, and we didn't have good ordinances, we didn't have good guidelines to evaluate things with criteria. And so, you know, one of those key things we sought in that exercise was caucus input. And a lot of our trailheads or trails go through various caucus areas where I think they would like to have a chance to have some input and some understanding of what this means and what will happen. And Steve, I appreciate so much your example and your input, but you weren't talking about the class 3, which goes 28 miles per hour, and who knows how much more on a downhill. And so you do get some, I'd love to see some of the momentum equals mass times velocity. I have no idea what e-bikes weigh compared to regular bikes, you know, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, a lot of information to make a valid and lasting decision. And what really is coming to mind to me the most is the wrangling that has happened at the State House, multiple sessions over the off-highway vehicles, off-road vehicles, and particularly, say, over in Ouray County and Silverton, and they have the Mineral Loop and things like this, where they've had horrible, horrible accidents, and they search forever to get licensing and insurance issues. You know, if you have a 15 or a 14-year-old on an e-bike and they crash into someone because they weren't able to handle it, is that pedestrian able to sue them? Do they have civil liability? Do they have any insurance to cover it, to help someone in the hospital? And having just run into a friend who had a hit and run and is trying to pick up all her own medical bills from a car, you know, those are real issues. And in the rental agencies that are rendering these off-highway vehicles, one of my good friends was there and saw this couple who was very excited about going out, and they had a very small child, and she asked, well, did the rental company give you a child seat for in the off-road vehicle? And they're like, no. Well, the standard adult seat belts don't work for a child who's 45 pounds. And so there's all sorts of questions about insurance on these, or do you need personal liability insurance if you're on an e-bike or not? Or would there be a requirement, and I'm not saying there should be, I'm just saying these are the type of issues that have come up among trail users in other areas. And they've had a lot more calls for their search and rescue, quite frankly, to rescue people who've gone off a gully or didn't make a curve and things like that. The other thing that really is of consideration is helmets. If a child's on the back, is the adult required to have a helmet for that child on a bike that's going 28 miles per hour? Or no? You know, I mean, these are just these issues that need to come up when you're tasked with considering the health, safety, and general welfare of all users. And I'd like to get it right as opposed to being reactionary later. And so maintaining a status quo and taking the time to get it right and ensure the safety of our guests, our residents, our children, that's the most important thing to me.
So George, can I make a motion?
Or is we having any public comment with folks who've come in, or?
Is this a public hearing, or is the public hearing on the second reading?
So,
Up to our chair on that.
yeah, typically the public hearing is at the confirmatory reading. However, with an emergency ordinance, it does take effect right away, and I think it'd be appropriate at the chair's discretion to take comments.
All right, I will take public comment. If you just need to come up to the mic, introduce yourself, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, please.
Hey, let me make sure the mic's on. Okay, you're good.
So, my name's Michael Dillard. I live in Pitkin County. I have an e-bike. It doesn't weigh more than the Wii bikes. It doesn't run more than 20 miles an hour. I don't have it so I can go fast. I'm create no more liability for the county riding my e-bike than my other bike, and it is a mountain bike. Okay. We built a lot of great trails here. Unfortunately, they're not all accessible to all the citizens. Some of them, excuse me, are cold. Some of them are old, not just, what's the word, disabled. Okay, some of them are just old, and I'm getting old too. And you know, these trails are not gonna be accessible to these people. If you just want trails for the really hot rod mountain bikers, then we spend a lot of money for just a few people. If you wanna make them accessible to everybody, then this is a good way to do it. I don't think that e-bikes need to go 28 miles an hour. I don't think they need to have a throttle, but a lot of people need a little bit of assist. This bike, the one I ride, replaces a car in my family for the most part. I have 2 people in my household who need help, and they can ride with me if they ride an e-bike. Just to make it clear, I'm probably more likely to stop at a stop sign with the e-bike where we have an assist to get you going again than to try to coast through one because you don't want to start over when you're pedaling. I didn't buy it for speed. Don't want to pass everybody on the trail. And I'm fine with the idea that we have a speed limit on the trails and the streets for bikes and cars. And that's about all I have to say. I'm in favor of e-bikes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Anybody else wish to make a comment? Come up.
Hello, my name is Nancy Dunlap, and I'm a part-time resident. I've been a taxpayer since 1999, and I've been an e-bike owner since June. And I put 250 miles on it just coming back and forth from my house off Cemetery Lane in lieu of a car. I'm enjoying the opportunity to be on a bicycle now, and when I've been on the Rio Grande, my behavior has actually been better than many of the people who are going a lot faster than I am, because I knew I had to be responsible if I was going to be using the e-bike. So I'd like you to consider, in addition to the health and safety and welfare of the people who don't ride a bike, the health and safety that's being brought to people who might not have been on a bike otherwise and are also taking cars off the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes?
Hi, I'm Michael Wampler, and I own Aspenville Bike Shop I'm part of the problem at the moment, so to speak. I'm going to approach this from a couple of different angles. I'm going to start with the local, and I'm going to chime in on Steve here. We're trying to get people out of cars. And for the people who live in Woody Creek, people who live in Snowmass Village, these e-bikes are the answer on getting into work. They can come into work, they don't have parking issues, they're not part of the congestion, they can roll around town at lunch or any of their other errands. But to get here, they're either going to have to come in on Owl Creek or they have to come in on the Rio Grande. With the world of driving these days, with people on phones in Texas, it's getting more and more dangerous on a road bike as an ex-road racer. People aren't going to do that. They're just not going to do it. They want to get on the trails. They want to come to work. That's point one. Point two is obviously I'm a tourist-based industry, and we're here in Aspen of trying to make our guests as comfortable as possible, trying to make life easier for them, not harder. We rent an enormous amount of bikes in the summertime. Most of my customers, 80% of my customers have white hair. So what are they doing? They're up till this year, they were taking what we call a comfort bike, going to Woody Creek Tavern, and what are they doing? They're calling a taxi cab. So let's assume I'm renting 4,000 or 5,000 bikes a summer, and say 3,000 are coming back in a taxi cab. Well, do we need to add up the numbers here, or do we not? We throw them on an e-bike, there's no excuse for them to come in a cab. The cabs don't want them. One, they break their racks. And two, these people want to ride back if they can. It's quicker, it's certainly cheaper, and they have a better experience going both ways. So my point is, these bikes are here. They're here to stay. When I tried to retire last year. My son decided he wanted to get in the business, so I'm still here. Mm-hmm. But when I went to the bike show last year, over 60% of the exhibitors were e-bikes. Mm-hmm. In Europe right now, it's like 80% e-bikes. Conventional bikes, as we know them, comfort bikes, town bikes, in 3 years will be gone. They're just going to be gone. We need to accept that. We need to manage this situation, not deny it. And I think we're taking the proper first step right here, right now. But these bikes are going to be here. They're getting more sophisticated. Batteries are going longer. Right now, you can get up to 100 miles on an e-bike charge. That's a lot of not being in a car and not using gas and sitting in traffic. They're also getting lighter. Right now, they're about 50 pounds. Now, that being said, downhill bikes, traditional, conventional, weigh 50 pounds. So are you trading one for the other? And then finally, my comment is Rio Grande. As an ex-road racer, I've had more than one of your rangers chase me into my shop, not even knowing he's following me. I can go down that trail at 35, 40 mile an hour in my heyday, not now.
I was going to say, I want to time you.
But, it's up to the rider. You got Ferraris going up and down 82. Can they go 140? Yeah. Do they? No, they can't. You got these bikes that can go 20, 25, 28 mile an hour. But it's got to be that rider that has to have some kind of common sense on how fast they're going to go, how they're going to react to things. Speaking of somebody who rented a lot of e-bikes this summer, to my knowledge, we didn't have one wreck. Not one wreck, not hit a person, not turn a bike over, not hit anything. That's got to say something for a first-year situation. And again, riding an e-bike is just riding a regular bike, just a little bit heavier. That's all it is. So common sense has to prevail. And I implore you to let's get this resolved. Now, let's go to section, or the categories 1, 2, and 3. 1, you have to pedal. You have to pedal. They're limited to 20. You quit pedaling, power kicks out. You touch the brakes, power kicks out. Level 2, throttle. I don't like them. Steve doesn't use his. Ban them. I'm okay with that. 3 is limited to mountain bikes, backcountry mountain bikes. It's not your cross bike. It's not anything cityfied. It's your back. And why they go 20 on a class 3? Got me. There's no reason to have to go uphill at 28. Downhill, guys can hit 40, 50 anyway. But if we want to restrict 2 and 3, do it. Now, enforcing that, how the hell are you going to do that? They all look alike. So anyway, I'm open for comments or to meet with any of you guys. I'd be glad to do it. A year ago right now, I knew very little about e-bikes. I know a hell of a lot now.
We're bringing you in.
And if I can help you out at all, I would be glad to do that. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to make any public comments?
Tag team.
Hi, I'm Paul Williams from Aspen Bike Rentals, another rental shop up the road.
Maybe turn the thing up a little. There you go.
There you go. I think what Rachel said, equating it to the marijuana industry, is true. They're popular, fun, and everybody wants to do it. Someone got it. What Michael said is true about the e-bikes, and we invite you guys to come in and try out the bikes that we have in our shop. I think it would be a big eye-opener. There is a big difference between the class 1, 2, and 3. With the pedal assist bikes, you have to pedal. It's not a free ride. So when you're pedaling, you're getting assisted. When you stop pedaling, there is no more assistance. If you ride one of these bikes up Smuggler, you can't get up there in 5 minutes. It's not a motorcycle going up. You have to put the time and the effort into it. So it's not a throttle. So it is like riding a regular bike. I hear a lot of the concern was about the speed on the trails. And, what has already been spoken, but you can get any bike up to 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And going 20 or 18 or 15 miles an hour is not that fast riding a bicycle. I think you would be surprised, as Steve said, you look at the speedometer, you're like, wow, I'm going 25, 30, 40 miles an hour. And, you can get there on any bike. And in 3 years, you're not going to know the difference between an e-bike and a regular bike, guaranteed. I mean, I think it was 2 years ago, they had it in the Tour de France where they caught someone that had a similar technology of an e-bike in the hub, and they didn't, these people are racing side by side, and the bikes, that was a special case. But in 2 or 3 years, with the way the batteries are going now, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a pedal assist bike and a normal bike. So, but again, we invite you guys to come in and try the bikes out. You guys can take them out on a county road where they're legal, not on the Rio Grande Trail, and see for yourself what they feel like. And I think you would be surprised that it's not, with the class 1 we're talking about, the pedal assist bikes, not the throttle bikes. It's like riding a normal bike. And I think everyone's kind of jumping to a conclusion that these things are, a big demon cruising down the Rio Grande Trail and clearing everyone out. They're not. They're just helping. They're just giving a little bit of assist. And that's why they're called pedal assist. And come on in and try them out. And I think you guys might change your mind a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to make any public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board.
Yeah. George? I just want to thank everybody who did take the time to come in from their days to give us a little insight. I'm not biased against or for. I just want to know the facts well and assure that we do it right, from the very beginning. And one of those things that really strikes me particularly is we don't have much signage on our trails, either the beginning or the end, or instructions or etiquette or anything. And that's the type of thing we need to be caught up on before we really launch into something this new. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, just a clarification there from what I've seen, because I've been doing a lot of walking. Sorry, guys, I don't ride a bike. I'm not safe on a bike, in any kind of bike. There is an etiquette as far as ringing the bell. The city even requires them. All that stuff. You don't hear it a lot. It's nice when you do, because some of them come up behind you and one step to the side and you can be nailed by somebody. And I don't do headphones. I do talk on my phone, usually to business. But so those are things we need to be careful of. But I would like to make a motion to approve an emergency ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, prohibiting electric bikes on Pitkin County trails. This does keep intact what is currently in existence with Open Space and Trails Management Plan. And I would like to add a paragraph at the end restricting this, putting a sunset date of May 1st, 2018. I would like us to have something
I will second the motion.
Moving forward for next summer season.
Okay, and then I guess if for whatever reason we don't have the process completed by then.
It will come back to us
we have
for
the opportunity to extend it.
Right.
Okay, well, the consumer based demand for e-bikes is certainly growing rapidly, as we've heard. I think it's well ahead of the infrastructure that we have, and I think that specifically pertains to our bike trails. It's definitely going to allow the opportunity, as we've heard from this lady, to allow new riders into the market. It's going to allow the growth for the industry. It's going to put more people on the trail. And a lot of the issues and concerns that have been discussed today, I think are appropriate. And that's going to be part of our open dialogue and discussion as we move forward, starting with the Open Space and Trails Board, certainly the RAFT Board, and any other jurisdictions that pertain to it. So I look forward to those conversations. It may be that we end up, even on the Rio Grande Trail, it may be that we end up that certain segments are available and other segments are not. I mean, we have no idea. So until we have those conversations to move forward. But this ordinance allows that process to continue, to ensure that we have a current plan in place, that we are addressing and will address the health, safety, and welfare of all of our citizens and all of our multi-users, and come up with an adaptive plan. So.
I just have one other, I think for me, it's really that at the end of the day, we have not only an informed, but a participatory decision made, and I don't think we have all of that in front of us today. So I think supporting this and moving this forward now provides for that process. And with the time frame, I'm a lot more comfortable with it.
Okay, any further comments?
Well, yeah, I appreciate, again, everyone who's come in to talk about this. And what I'd like to say is for Lindsay, Open Space and Trails, to take a really hard look at this. And if you need an adjustment to your budget, or perhaps outside consultant, or anything like that, to try to stay on track for this timeline, let us know.
She's writing that down.
She's writing it down, but.
Rachel's signature on it.
Yeah, no, I think that that's appropriate. I don't want to just handle a bunch of things on top of what you're already doing. It is budget season. There's a chance to build it in for work that begins in January 1st. But, we are putting a relatively short timeline on for all the various players and participants we'd like to have involved, because you mentioned the jurisdictions, which of course are the ones who pass the rules, but it's got to be done in concert with the user groups, and that's a lot of user groups, so we will be
And the
here-
neighborhoods.
and the neighborhoods. So anyhow, I just want to say, just let us know where that's at and how we can do this effectively and thoroughly, and not feel rushed when we get to the end, and that we've really talked with all the players and looked at the various issues.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Great,
Did
thank
we
you all
set
for
a date
coming.
for the confirmatory hearing?
Oh, it's in the memo, I think. It was,
I didn't see one.
oh,
I believe we're 2 weeks out.
Usually 2 weeks.
generally 2 weeks.
It's usually 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it'll be,
At the
at
regular
our next regular meeting will be the confirmatory, okay.
The 23rd.
So I will adjourn our special meeting, and I think with that, we're done for the day. We'll be back here at noon for a regular meeting. Thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you, Grassroots, and
you very
everybody read their packet from the,
Yeah. Patty, I already, and Steve, I already let George know, I'm going to be about 15 minutes late for the.
Sure.